Okay, so um, good evening. If you would have noticed, it's been quite a busy day on the channel today. I think we're into double figures on videos uploaded on the channel today. Um, a lot of research done. I've spent the best part of 8 9 hours researching and uploading content. So it's been kind of fun today. Also, obviously, some big sports stories. Juan Mata is going to leave Manchester United in the summer when his contract's done. Ben Mee is going to leave Burnley when his contract runs down, and James Tarkowski may also follow suit. So the clear out at Man United and the player exodus at Burnley have really begun in earnest. Rudiger has now officially um, joined Real Madrid because his contract had already expired. So he was eligible to be signed because you can sign a free agent outside the transfer window if they are available. So Rudiger's now joined up with Real Madrid, and so very so there's a lot of free transfers basically taking place. Apart from Haaland's transfer to Manchester City, a lot of free transfers taking place at the moment. So really interesting. And Tottenham, I think, were the club to get the ball rolling, with Perisic and Fraser Forster. So I wonder how many more players are going to be exiting Old Trafford, how many more players will exit Burnley, and how many free agents will be floating around. Yes, England did reasonably well on day one of the first test. Um, let's see how the batting lines up, because this could be a bowler's wicket. It's humid. Uh, overcast, sunny conditions. Let's see how England's batting lineup performs against New Zealand's bowling attack. And if England dominate with the bat, then yes, they've taken advantage of the conditions with the morning sessions to put themselves in the position they are now. One day's play doesn't necessarily mean we're going to win the Test match. We've got at least up to 4 more days. Sadio Mane, well, the official opening of the transfer window is not for another 8 days. So unless it's mixed messages, mixed messages. It was there's been a very strong rumor linking him with Bayern Munich. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to end up there if he does leave. There's also been a very strong rumor coming out that he's going to stay. So until the transfer window officially opens, because he is under contract, that's just going to be as it is at the moment, just hearsay and speculation. So the player movement that I've discussed is those players that we know are leaving on free transfers and those players that we know have been signed on free transfers and are having medicals. With the Sadio Mane one, speculating that he's going to go to Bayern is unjust and unfair, and that's just clickbait material. And I don't like doing clickbait kind of videos because anyone can do that. Um, and while it might help the channel get a stupid amount of views, it's not the type of content that I like to do. Until something concrete comes out saying like where Liverpool and Bayern are in official talks, there's no point in reporting something that's based on hearsay and rumor. So until it's been official that Liverpool have allowed an approach from Bayern, because if Bayern were to approach him now before the transfer window opens, that's tapping up, and that's in breach of transfer rules. So Bayern have to be careful. They have to obviously make a formal approach to Liverpool to then discuss negotiations. They've also got to meet his get out clause. So I can't see Liverpool selling Sadio Mane for 50 million. I think that's a bit on the low side. Um, but it depends what clause they've written in his contract for the buyout clause from his contract, because obviously Sadio Mane has been at the club now for quite a while, and of course the transfer market's got a bit more overinflated since he originally signed at Anfield. So sometimes it looks like you signed a really good contract at the time, but in the long run, it was good for you at the time as a player and as the club. But as the time goes on, it actually is bad for the club but good for the player. So, and sometimes vice versa. Sometimes really good for the club and bad for the player. Like the Messi situation at Barcelona with that stupid get out clause, and then the arguments about will he leave him free? He played another season. The get out clause being ridiculously high, that kind of thing. Yes, well, matter. It has been a long time. It is amazing how time flies. And it's also amazing how not long after Alex Ferguson leaves, they win 3 trophies in 2 seasons, and people forget that. People forget they actually had a little purple patch. Well, they didn't win the league, but they won both domestic cups and a European trophy in a 2-season spell with two different managers, and people forget that. People forget that Mourinho did a cup double, and Van Gaal in one of his I think in his last ever game as Man United manager, lifted the FA Cup. Um, so it hasn't always been doom. It hasn't been doom and gloom the complete time since Ferguson has left Manchester United. Technically, the Charity Shield has been won by Man United as well, which was David Moyes' first game, official competitive match as Man United manager. So silverware came in that initial period after Ferguson. The problem is, the longer it goes on, the further away from silverware they get. Now, Juan Mata is not the problem at Manchester United. He's one of the few signings I feel has served his purpose and they've got value for money out of him. I think Juan Mata is one of those few players where he has performed to the best of his ability and his fitness. And has definitely contributed to the positivity of that side, especially early on. As he's got older, he hasn't played every game. He plays less minutes. He's more of a squad player now, which is fine. I think he's happy with that at this stage in his career. But I am surprised they're letting him go for nothing. I'm surprised that, again, they didn't try and move him on in January or last year if they felt, okay, he's getting on a bit, but we can still get a return on the player. I am surprised they've let Pogba go for nothing, Mata go for nothing, Matic go for nothing. I'm really surprised by just some of the transfer dealings, both incoming and outgoing, they've made. I mean, they've let Pogba go on a free twice. Twice they've let Pogba go for nothing, which I find ridiculous as well. But yeah, 8 years, it has flown by, and he's got 3 more winners' medals. On his mantelpiece. He had a great successful time at Chelsea as well. Juan Mata is not a bad player, but Man United losing 2 of these veteran midfielders from their dressing room, I think, is a risk. It's a risk. But yeah, they haven't. Matic and Mata, injuries have started to play a part. They've lost that half a yard of pace. But losing them from the whole squad as a whole, as depth squad players, I think is a bit worrying. And there's no inclination from either of them that they're prepared to retire. They haven't stated, well, this is my last season, I'm going to call it quits and hang my boots up. They both basically mentioned that they want to keep playing. Obviously, they feel that they're better suited playing elsewhere. Now, whether that's in England or in continental Europe or in the MLS, you never know. They might Mata might decide to look at the MLS and wind down his career in America like many other players have done. Same with Matic; they could easily fit into an MLS side, and they are available. And they don't have to get paid stupid mega money to contribute to an MLS franchise. So that could be an option where they could, play that slightly less intense league, but they could still contribute to help a side develop. It just amazes me how Manchester United have mismanaged their transfers and their squad. And Matic and Mata aren't the problem. Not even close. Pogba's a big part of the problem, but Mata and Matic haven't been an issue, in my opinion. I think they've been value for money for large periods of their time. The issues with Man United go far deeper than those two players. They've been 2 of the players that I've criticised the least. As a neutral, as someone looking from the outside looking in, I think the fans have criticised them the least. The fans know that they're in a no-win catch-22 situation, and it's a very negative situation which they're not used to because they've come from a successful team like Chelsea, and they've come into a team that's becoming less successful, and it has been a difficult adjustment for them both. But I wouldn't say they've done badly. I mean, there's been a lot of chopping and changing with manager with not a lot of return coming back. Whereas at Chelsea, yes, the manager changed quite regularly, but the return coming back, there was always silverware coming back on a production line. And that just stopped at Man United. But this is where you've got to remember the league. You're not going to win the league every season. Bayern will not win the league every season. So if you as a player are going to go, I may not win the league every season, but I want to compete for trophies and play in finals. Man United did that for a little period. And it stopped. They've lost their last two finals. They've not been competing for trophies. I mean, last year they could have won. If they win that Europa League final last year, it's a different conversation. If they win that FA Cup final against Chelsea, it's a different conversation. We're having a different conversation. That's extra silverware brought to the club, but it didn't happen. And then the points total this season and the Ranić situation has definitely left a bitter taste. I think that's their worst points total in 30 years. It's definitely their worst Premier League finishing position and points total. It's not. It's not. It's their worst Premier League points total, not their worst finishing position. Their worst finishing position, I think, was 7th in 2014, but they got more points in 2014. What, looking from the outside in, concerns me is, yes, Eric Ten Hag is now, decided, he's already made a statement saying this is going to be my core that I'm going to build my team around. I'm going to work with these players. I'm going to use their feedback to, improve the tactics and work with them. These players aren't in my plans. And 3 of those players are leaving on free transfers, which is ridiculous, especially with the amount of money they pay for Pogba. Matic, I think that Matic and Mata, I think they've got their money's worth out of Matic and Juan Mata. I think they've contributed to the team and they've always put 110% in. Even if they're not playing well, you can see that they're committed to the cause. Pogba, no. He's not consistent enough. His attitude sucks. And, how there's been flashes. The FA Cup semi-final against Spurs, the Europa League final against Ajax. There's been flashes with Pogba, but not enough consistency. His attitude has been questioned heavily at times, very heavily at times. His fitness, um, his ability to work with others, so his teamwork, and how he fits in with the combinations with the side. The defensive frailties that he has in the game. You don't expect him to be perfect defensively, but you expect to see some improvement, and that hasn't been the case with Pogba. So there's definitely a lot for Eric Ten Hag to contend with, but I think the board and the owners need to be aware this is actually a rebuild now, and they need to give Eric Ten Hag at least, I would say, 18 months longer than they gave Solskjaer. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be like we win straight away. They might win a domestic cup competition, for example, like the League Cup or the FA Cup, but that's a stepping stone, a building block to continued success. I think it does show what a job Van Gaal did, and to a certain extent Mourinho did in the first half of his spell at the club, that they were able to get some silverware. And it shows how good a job Ferguson was doing with the players he had available and with the transfer policy that the club had throughout. It makes you wonder who is actually in charge of transfer policy as well. Are they actually, bringing players in that are going to contribute to the team or contribute to their bank balance? And I think Louis van Gaal has summed it up perfectly, going, they brought players in that sum up their bank balance and contribute to the bank balance rather than to success. Commercial club rather than a footballing club. I would say I think Ferguson towards the end that team was overachieving under Sir Alex Ferguson. I think when they were under Lou Van Gaal, Mourinho, I think that's the level they were at, where they were a good cup side but not quite good enough to win the league. And then it's gone completely wrong. And you could argue the Pogba return was the catalyst for an accelerated decline in the last, I'm going to say 4.5 years. The Maguire transfer they massively overpaid for Maguire. But the issues they've had in defence is, like Phil Jones, his career's been really decimated by injury. He can never get a decent run of the side because he's injured, and that affects his confidence and his form. I think he peaked earlier in his career than other players have. He was promising at Blackburn, but we played him more as a defensive midfielder. And then the injuries kicked in in his early days at Man United, and that did honestly impact his ability to develop as a defensive midfielder or a centre back within the Man United system. Harry Maguire, he's not worth 80 million. Whoever was in, signing off on some of these transfers has done a terrible job. And a lot of blame has been pointed at Ed Woodward over the years. He's no longer at the club. And yet bad signings have continued. They've allowed as I say, allowed 3 players to leave on a free that they could have cashed in on 6 to 12 months ago. So this time last year, they could have sold Pogba. They could have sold, Mata. They could have sold Matic. They decided to hold on to them and allow them to run their contracts now. Or they decided, we're not going to renew your contract. We're going to let you go for nothing. So, um, yeah, most clubs would end up in League One if they go bust or in administration if they spent like United. Well, United have. Oh, you look at the money spent on transfers versus the income and money received from transfers. Yes, they have spent a net spend of a stupid amount of money. Their total net spend is actually a lot less because you have income as well, so their net loss profit. But the amount of money they've spent on transfers is an astronomical figure. Astronomical. It's well over a billion. It's well over a billion. And most of that money has been spent in more recent years than in the earlier days in the Premier League. And they still had some flops in the early days in the Premier League. I mean, Forlan didn't really settle, but he was a world class striker. It just didn't work at United. Varane is a world class midfielder. Didn't work at United. Di Maria, another world class midfielder, didn't work at United. So they tried that South American experiment with those players who were brilliant, absolutely brilliant at other clubs. Didn't quite work at United when they were at the club at the time. But you put them into another side, they're fantastic. And Diego Forlan, wins a Golden Boot at the World Cup in 2010. So how it didn't work earlier on at Man United when he was a bit younger and had a bit more pace is, God only knows. Cavani actually hasn't been a bad signing for a guy who's meant to be a depth player to just be there for the experience, play mostly cup games and wind down his career. Edison Cavani's been a brilliant player, brilliant pickup. He's leaving on a free, which again I find really, really bizarre. Is Matic, Mata, and Cavani some of your senior players who haven't been part of the problem, may I add, who've actually put a shift in, whether they're leaders in the dressing room or not, they put a shift in. You can tell they put the effort in. They try their best for the team. They are teammates, proper team players. I'll leave him for nothing. The UEFA Nations League has been going now for a few seasons. It started after the 2018 World Cup. UEFA were being heavily criticised in regards to the amount of friendlies being played. And it was designed to improve ranking points and also to go towards Euro and World Cup qualifying, with the Euros being expanded and down the line, the World Cup being expanded. And I can understand the concept behind it to get rid of the pointless friendlies. But I think the format, to me, isn't necessarily confusing as such, but it actually has meant, especially in the last year and a half, with the rescheduling of matches because of the COVID pandemic, that there's a lot of fixture congestion. And when you've got players like Kevin De Bruyne coming out and saying, to be honest, I don't really want to play in this competition, not because he doesn't want to represent his country, but he's exhausted and he's had to deal with a fair few injuries in the last couple of years. When you've got high profile players going, they don't really feel they want to play this tournament. There's too much fixture congestion. I've always had mixed views about the Nations League. I'm not saying don't watch it or don't care about it, because it's there are competitive qualifiers taking place for the World Cup. Obviously, Scotland have been knocked out by Ukraine in their playoff, and Wales play Ukraine on Sunday, which is a very big game. England obviously are playing Italy and Germany and such. I wouldn't say don't care about it. It's basically there to partly assist with qualifying, I think, and partly to get rid of the pointless friendlies. But it's a lot of international games, and with the World Cup being played when it is, normally we're preparing to kick off for a World Cup right now. The World Cup build-up's happening. We'll have about 2 or 3 friendly games, warm-up games before the tournament starts. And normally, sometime in June, there'll be a 4 to 6 week period between June and July where the World Cup is played in a normal cycle. Obviously, it's been played in the middle of the Northern Hemisphere winter because it's been played in a country that's desert. and so therefore they've rearranged when the Nations League is being played. They can't play it, and the TV companies have put a lot of pressure on this as well, because obviously you've got the Rugby League World Cup which has been moved, so not all the stadiums necessarily would be available. For example, in October, let's say England want to take the games on the road, which has happened before. Yes, they can go to Wembley, but they can't necessarily use the Emirates, for example, or some of the stadiums like Old Trafford because they're being used. And that creates a TV clash as well, which they want to avoid. And then, yeah, you've got the World Cup at a weird time of year. If you want to watch international football that is sort of got a meaning behind it, absolutely watch it. My thoughts on it is this doesn't solve necessarily the problem that we have with the international calendar as it currently stands in recent years. And managers and players have been coming out saying that we're playing too many games. Um, the fitness and the well-being of our players is important. And when you've got players like Kevin De Bruyne coming out questioning the Nations League format, at least this year, that's again more criticism aimed at UEFA. Now, I've not really been fully sold on the idea. I'm not against having the. Hang on 1 second. Hello. Uh, can I call you back in a bit? No, no, I'm busy. All right, bye. How much more competitive? Well, there's ranking points and there's qualification. It also affects like where you end up in qualification groups and seedings and rankings for qualifying groups for tournaments. So it's designed to get rid of the pointless friendlies. Um, I personally think friendlies should just be used as warm up games for tournaments like Euros and World Cups. Now, there is this debate that, well, yes and no. I personally think that in between every tournament, so the tournament, which is a 2 year cycle, World Cup, Euros, World Cup, or in, I don't know how the North American Gold Cup kind of CONCACAF competition works, but CONMEBOL, you've got the Copa America, and then you obviously have that kind of Copa America World Cup cycle as well. I think there's a better way that UEFA could do it. The qualifying tournament should be played in the years there's not a World Cup or a Euros. Have your qualifying groups played them in that period, and then you just use the friendlies for warm ups for the following year to the Euros or the World Cup. I think that's a better way to solve the issues that we have with the international calendar. It simplifies it, and therefore you ironically get less congestion. You don't have all these stupid international breaks mid-season that disrupt the flow of the domestic league season. That club country debate, because we've had a lot of international breaks that were very condensed in a very short space of time because the Euro's been moved by a year and the World Cup being when it is. There was a lot of international breaks in the first half of the league season, and I think that has had an impact. Looking at the two European finals that I did watch, the FA Cup final, players looked out on their feet very early on. The teams that played, and it was very obvious that players were struggling with fatigue. No, I'm not saying that they're not fit or whatever, but when you're playing 60 plus games a season at club level, to then play, I don't know, is it 7, 8, 9, 10 internationals outside of a World Cup year as well, with friendlies and competitive qualifiers and playoff qualifiers, plus the Euros. You've got to think, the last 12 months, some players have played about 80 odd games plus in total. They're out on their feet. There was this young Spanish player last year that I think played 70, 75 games. He also played at the Euros as well as all his club's league games and all the international games in a calendar year. That's more than there's 52 weeks. Yeah, 52 weeks in a year. Is it 52 or 56 weeks in a year? Can't remember now. Oh shit! It's 12 months of 4 weeks each. There's 56 weeks in a year, and he's played over 70 games, so that's over a game a week. That's a lot of fixtures. That's a lot of football on the body. And yes, he's young, so you could argue that there has been an excessive amount of football played in a very short space of time. And other sports are now trying to say there's only so many games you can play in a calendar year now. So rugby union and to a certain extent rugby league are trying to limit the amount of games players play for welfare issues, because obviously association football, European football is obviously a different type of physical sport, contact sport, compared to the massive collisions you have in the NFL, for example, or rugby league, or rugby union, or ice hockey. It's a different um, physicality. But when you're playing, you know, I mean, in the NHL, if you don't make the playoffs and you play every game, you're playing 82 games a year. And then you've got to consider, are you selected for the World Championship side that your nation plays in? So you have to, figure that out. And that's a lot of games. That's 80 to 90 games a year, something like that. If you play in the European leagues, it's around 50 to 60 ice hockey matches in a year plus World Championships. So that's a lot of you know brutal, physically demanding sport. So this debate about the player welfare side of things is not going away. And when you've got, as I say, when you've got high profile players like Kevin De Bruyne questioning this year's Nations League, um, I don't think he's wrong in what he's saying. I don't necessarily fully agree with what he's saying, but at the same time, I can understand his feelings and frustrations. So it's a mix of the two. I'm not 100% sold on the Nations League yet. Um, I do honestly believe that there are better ways to solve the international calendar versus the club calendar when it comes to football. Um, it's very popular in Australia. I mean, it is a professional sport, surfing. It does have a world championships. It does have national championships. Professional surfers do earn a lot of money. It's obviously very popular in places like California and Australia and South Africa and even around the European coastlines. It is very, very popular. But it's only obviously it's limited to where you surf, which is the coastal areas. So, but in the areas where it's Hawaii, you've got like places like around Tahiti, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, South America is quite popular. California, in the areas where it's popular because they're coastal destinations. You get the right kind of waves. Um, there's that kind of surfing kind of community. The local tourist community is geared to it. You do surfing. It is a professional sport, but I wouldn't say it's niche, but obviously you need a coastline for one. And windsurfing, for example, was an Olympic sport. Um, so it does have its fans, and it's an extreme sport. And extreme sport, is one of those areas that regularly, attracts the younger sports fans and those adrenaline junkies. And it's been heavily marketed in the last 30 years. I mean, Point Break, for example, and the remake of Point Break, they've made films about surfing. And Point Break is one of the best action films of all time. But yes, there is a professional. There is professionalism in surfing, and there's like its own certain subculture within surfing, and it is very popular on Australia's south and eastern coast, and it is very popular on the west coast of the US, and it is very popular in Hawaii, and in parts of South Africa, Cornwall and Devon. It's quite popular on the coast around here. Um, I think yeah, surfing it could become more popular. It's already quite. I mean, snowboarding, for example, is the winter sport equivalent. But again, you limit yourself with the popularity of a certain sport when you require geographical and climatic conditions for it, like mountains and coastline. And not everyone is going to enjoy winter sports. Not everyone's going to enjoy extreme water sports. That sounded really bad, but you understand what I mean. Like where you need to be on a coastline, you need to have the right weather conditions and the right wave conditions to surf and windsurf. In the winter sports, you need the right snow conditions, the right temperature, the right type of snow. So when you rely on sports that rely on geographical and climatic conditions, you do sort of limit yourself with your sport athlete base. Um, but um, I think if as a recreational sport where people just do it for keep fit and socialising, it's exceptionally popular in Cornwall here in the UK and Devon because we have the coastline for it in those locations. Obviously, exceptionally popular in South and Central California, Hawaii. It's one of the state icons of Hawaii is the surfing. One of the big draws of Hawaiian tourism. Yeah, east and southern coasts in Australia, so the coast of Victoria, all the way up Tasmania, all the way up to Queensland. It's exceptionally popular. South Africa, around Durban, Port Elizabeth, and Cape Town, exceptionally popular there. So it does have its fans, but at the same time, it is quite a niche sport unless you actually are into that adrenaline junkie niche kind of. It's like snowboarding. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It's not everyone's cup of tea. But if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If not, not the end of the world. But Point Break really in 1990 really sold the idea of surfing to a wider audience. Partly because Patrick Swayze was in the film, and it was a breakout role for Keanu Reeves, following some of his other films that he's done. But that was one of his breakout roles that made him a more mainstream actor. But because Patrick Swayze was in it, it became a Hollywood hit. Much like the Mighty Ducks film did for ice hockey in Europe, especially in and parts of the US, and Space Jam did for the NBA. That was a thing. Um, you love to talk about the goalkeepers from the 90s and the 2000s. Well, we also had some goalies from the 80s in there. I think we should talk about the centre back and fullbacks from the 90s and the 2000s. We could be here for years with that discussion. I mean, that could go on for hours. And while I did enjoy the conversation we had in regards to the goalkeepers, I wouldn't want to bore everyone to death, basically, because not everyone in the chat necessarily would either enjoy discussing basic continuation of the discussion last night, and yes, it's fun looking back on the memories of yesteryear, but at the same time, there's a good crop of young players coming through right now, and I think football's going to reach back to that 90s, 2000s level that we all enjoyed with some of the young players that are coming through right now, after a period of what we call slight decline, where Ronaldo and Messi have been the dominant Ballon d'Or winners. In the 90s and the 2000s, multiple players won the Ballon d'Or, and I think we're going to see multiple players win the Ballon d'Or going forward. I think we've got a changing of the guard, and there's some really young, really fantastically talented young players coming through in a variety of positions. I do remember Eurosport in the 90s, and guess what? That's when it was free to air. Now you've got to pay for it. But yeah, I remember I was addicted to Eurosport in the 90s and the early 2000s. That's one of the reasons why I got so addicted to so many sports. And Eurosport's still going. You just got to pay for a subscription for it now. Uh, so there's that. How much did Sol Campbell's? I will get back to the Norwich City. I will get to you, obviously. When you mentioned the comments, Mr. ASC Proxima, I had to do an Ipswich Town video just to wind the Norwich City fans up. But look, you've got some trophies in there yourself. Don't forget that. And you've got some European nights that I even remember watching on TV when you had Brian Gunn in goal. So, yeah, I will do a Norwich City video tomorrow. Don't you worry. I will get to you, Canaries and Delia Smith. Well, come on, lads, where are you? Where's the fan base when she was drunk on the pitch, screaming at the fans to get behind the team? Don't you worry. I will find some embarrassing facts about Norwich City tomorrow. The Sol Campbell move was more. I wouldn't say it impacted Spurs as much as people think. It was more the impact on him and the rivalry between Arsenal and Spurs in North London. The abuse he received and still receives to this day, in my opinion, is a step too far. I wouldn't say it overly impacted Spurs. It positively impacted Arsenal. He was one of those defensive players they just needed to continue their period of being a dominant side. When you build a multiple championship winning side, in cup or league in European football. Sometimes it's that one signing that completes um, the setup you need. And he was already a very good player at Spurs, but he, I think, developed more at Arsenal and was more consistent at Arsenal than he was at Spurs. He was really very good at Spurs. There's no denying that. But Arsenal made him the better player. So in reality, it had a bigger impact on Arsenal and Sol Campbell's career going to Highbury from White Hart Lane than if he'd stayed at Spurs. I don't necessarily think Spurs would still have had the lack of success. I think it would still been second fiddle, because partly because Wenger was manager at Arsenal at the time, some of the other players playing at Arsenal at the time, and he did improve as a player both for England and at club level by that transfer. Um, but the abuse he received and it intensified the rivalry because I don't think any other player at that point had played for both clubs. Um, and that intensity of the rivalry. He was one of the best centre backs at the time in English football, and people forget that. People do forget that peak prime Sol Campbell at his best was one of the best centre backs. Plus, Tony Adams was coming to the end of his career, and they needed a replacement. And Sol Campbell was a bit obviously younger, more athletic, and had a bit more pace about him, and was a perfect fit for the system that Wenger wanted to play. Um, was he the best centre back we've had? No. Was he a really good centre back? Yes. And going to Arsenal helped his career go to that next level, and in himself, he took himself to that next level. Um, um, Have I watched sports films before? Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of sports films. I think Days of Thunder about NASCAR, I think, with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman is probably my favourite sports film. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm a massive fan of them, really, if I'm being honest. Um, I've watched enough of them to go, yeah, some of them are really cheesy. Slapshot and Goon are quite funny. They're ice hockey ones. They're tongue in cheek kind of humour about the rough and tumble, rough, violent side of hockey. Um, but in reality, I'm not a massive fan of sports films. Really, there are some good ones out there. I'm not, you know, disputing that, but I'm not overly fond of them because they are exceptionally stereotypical, cheesy. I think the one that's possibly the most enjoyable, apart from Cool Runnings, which is a huge take on fiction on that Olympic Games with the Jamaican bobsleigh team. It's lots of fictionalisation there, but they do use the actual footage of their bobsleigh runs. For me, Miracle, about the Miracle on Ice, Lake Placid Winter Olympics in 1980. That I think is my favourite um, sport film because it's the most historically and factually accurate. There you go. But most of them I don't over enjoy because they're very stereotypical, cheesy. If it's based on historical facts, they take a lot of license there. Any Given Sunday is quite good though. Any Given Sunday is quite a good one with Al Pacino, with his war speech, which is a bit overdone, but it's quite a good one. Yeah, Canada and the US. I mean, the US didn't qualify for the last World Cup, which was a big blow for them. Big blow, and they had to look at themselves long and hard. And Jurgen Klinsmann's involved, obviously, still even today with the US development and youth systems and the structures they have in place. And I think it's good that they have that European influence on their development. And Jurgen Klinsmann did a very, very good job as American US head coach. Bearing in mind that he's won the competition as a player, he's played in some of the top leagues in Europe as a player. Having Jurgen Klinsmann on board with the US system is vitally important. I don't think a North American team wins a World Cup. Not anytime soon. I think they've got a long, long way to go to be on the European, South American level for player quality. Doesn't mean they can't make the knockout stages and put a marker down for the next World Cup, but I don't think they win at least for 20, 30 years. I don't think we're there yet. I think we'll be in our 50s and our 60s when it happens. Um, I think they've got a long way to go to get the talent pool at a level that is on a European, South American quality level to win. But definitely, I do think they're going to have a good tournament in Qatar. I do think both Canada and the US and even Mexico will go into the knockout stages, possibly quite deep into the knockout stages, because all three teams are obviously building towards co-hosting the World Cup in 4 years' time. So they want to put down a marker here, something to build upon, and prove to FIFA it was the correct decision to award them the World Cup over Morocco. There's that. Um, I would. Belgium, I think, are overrated. Yes, they've got some world-class players like the Hazard brothers, De Bruyne, Courtois in goal, Mignolet as a backup goalkeeper. I mean, Belgium have got some brilliant players. At the same time, have their golden generation? Is it too late for Eden Hazard? You know, has success passed Eden Hazard by? But Torgan Hazard, he's still young, um, and he had a decent Euros. De Bruyne, he's had some injuries, obviously, and I don't think De Bruyne is ever fully fit for some reason. Um, but they've got two world-class goalkeepers, especially Courtois. And Mignolet is a solid number two, so they've definitely got some quality in a lot of positions on the field. It's they just underachieve in major tournaments, and yet they're constantly ranked in the CUF top few in the world. Where do I think Africa are in their development in football? We've seen flashes from countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, Senegal in the past. We have seen flashes from some of the nations, but not enough consistency from them. And that's the problem. We've seen flashes from, as I say, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, you know, Senegal, those West African nations over the last 30 years, but not enough consistency. But some really top players have come out of Africa for years, going back to George Weah from Liberia back in the 90s with Man City and AC Milan. But there's not enough consistency, and the corruption within the game, and the money issues within the game, and the infrastructure issues that African football has, and the governance issues that African football has, is why there's only been one World Cup in Africa, and they haven't taken that next step. I mean, look, at some point, yes, an African nation will win the FIFA World Cup at some point. Look, South Africa have proven it in cricket and rugby union that an African nation can win a World Cup. But there's a difference, you see. South Africa, when it comes to cricket and rugby union, even their football, soccer, they've established themselves as world class because they actually do have the educational infrastructure and the sporting infrastructure in place. And they put a lot of emphasis on physical activity and sports as at youth. They've got well-funded universities and a lot of expensive private schools and grammar schools where it's actually mandatory and part of the curriculum. And there's a big link between South Africans and North American and British universities, and a lot of their best players, especially in rugby union and cricket, play in Europe, and then even some of their best football players have played in Europe and North America when it comes to rugby union. So South Africa is slightly different to the rest of Africa in having a more European, North American outlook with their sport, and they put a lot of emphasis on their sport when it comes to education, which is I find very, very important. But will an African nation win the Football World Cup? We'll see. I mean, Pele is he's not wrong, but I wouldn't say he's right either. I think time will tell, but Africa has to go a long way with its infrastructure because it can't just be led by a country like South Africa, for example, which does have the stadium infrastructure and the sporting pedigree in other sports. But issues with corruption, issues with poverty, issues with infrastructure, governance, and pathways are gonna be barriers that do need to be broken down at some point. But it's doable. It is doable, but at the same time, there are a lot of infrastructure and structural barriers in the way. And FIFA and UEFA and CONMEBOL and CONCACAF haven't necessarily helped AFCON knock down those barriers necessarily. I think the other federations do need to look at themselves and go, have we really assisted African football? Because African Rugby Union, in my opinion, I think is further ahead than African football in organisation and quality and consistency. In my personal opinion, with what I've seen. So make of that what you will. So that's my personal opinion on the state of African football. It doesn't mean it won't happen. They now hosted that World Cup. I mean, Morocco's, bid on successfully in the bid for a World Cup, but they are saying, well, actually, look, Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia have been going to World Cups since the 70s. So to say there isn't pedigree there is a lie. Obviously, South Africa were in the sporting wilderness for 35 odd years because of apartheid. If that isn't the case, then maybe, yes, we could be further ahead in talking and discussing about Africans having won a World Cup or being close to winning a World Cup. Because, South Africa puts a lot of emphasis on sport. They have won cricket and rugby union World Cups. And that's something that no other African nation can say is we've won a World Cup in something. South Africans say we've hosted them and we've won them, and that's the difference. And the Africa Cup of Nations, the quality in January wasn't great when I watched it. It really wasn't great. There was a distinct lack of quality. It was quite a poor tournament. And people are saying we should increase the number of African nations that compete at the World Cup. Africa will win an African nation will win a World Cup within the next 10 to 20 years. No, they won't. The quality was not good enough by a long way. The discipline of players is not good enough. There's no lacking of commitment. Quality levels not good enough. So there you go. No, there's no African nation in my mind close to winning the World Cup right now. They might have some world-class players coming out of Africa, like your Sadio Mane's, for example, and your Edouard Mendy's at Chelsea. But in my opinion, I'm being as honest as I can without, being disingenuous. Not right now. The African nations will make the knockout stages of the World Cup, absolutely, but winning the World Cup, not at the moment, in my opinion. I'm not saying it won't happen, but in the next two World Cups, probably not. Well, it depends because I don't know about the South Africa. I think the South African season is their off season. So South Africa, had they qualified, which I don't think they have, it would have benefited South Africa because it's their summer. So that means that's their off season because they're Southern Hemisphere. It's the height of their summer, which is why I think the South American nations will have a decent tournament. Those nations that it's their, you have summer leagues in the Northern Hemisphere, like Sweden, for example, Denmark, they will benefit. The US and Canada will benefit because the MLS is also played in our summer, so right now. So I think those leagues that play in our winter, their summer, so the Southern Hemisphere, like Australia, South America, and the Scandinavian and North American countries whose domestic leagues play in our summer, don't play at that time of year, will have, in my opinion, a slight advantage in fresh players being fresher. them being used to that being like, when they would normally play their qualifiers and internationals, um, and therefore not having to worry about, club country commitments, disrupting their season because it's on their off-season cycle when they would be available for international qualifiers or friendlies in a normal cycle. So I think it benefits those leagues that play in the Northern Hemisphere summer. So the Scandinavian leagues and the MLS and the South American and Australian leagues. For what quality they are is irrelevant, but I do think it will benefit those nations to a certain extent. Obviously, at the end of the day, the European and South American players, those nations have the most depth and the most talent. But I think Japan, US, Canada, Australia, they're going to have better tournaments than they otherwise would if the World Cup was played at the normal time of year, because all their players are fully available. A lot of their players will be fully rested because their seasons ended quite a few months earlier, so they're fresh, they're relaxed, they're rested. It is really their off season, so they're not going from league play into camp to play within a week like the England team are. They are going end of season, relax, refresh, work on whatever injuries or niggles they've got, get back to fitness, go into camp, then play their first game. So they have that little bit more extra preparation time, and they will be less fatigued. So that's where I think this tournament could throw up some unexpected surprises. What leagues around the world should we keep an eye on in the next few years? I'm going to say the MLS. I only say that because of the new spending rules UEFA are going to be bringing into place. I think the MLS is going to pick up a lot of European-based talent that's playing in Europe right now because clubs cannot afford to keep them. And the MLS obviously is not governed by USA Soccer; it's governed by their board of governors, and they've got a World Cup coming up, so they want to improve their domestic product for the US and Canadian audience. So I see the MLS, I think, possibly massively benefiting for the influx of better quality players from Europe because of UEFA's new spending rules. Um, uh, yes, a lot of Japanese, American, Canadian, Koreans do play in Europe at various levels, applying their trade. That is known. That is fair. Pulisic and Son, for example, in the Premier League, are famous examples. But as I say, with the UEFA new spending rules coming into force within the next year or two, I can see the MLS picking up a lot of players that clubs just cannot afford to re-sign on extend contracts or afford their wages because they've got to reduce their expenditure. So I can see the MLS going, come over here, we can give you a wage. And the US obviously has got is co-hosting the World Cup in 4 years. They're going to want to improve their domestic product for their domestic audience. They're going to attract a lot of players over there, younger players who are on the edge of breaking through, and some more veteran players like your Juan Matas and your Matiches who are available right now. If they were to be available in a year or two's time, hypothetically, MLS is the perfect destination for them to wind down their career for the last couple of years, but still play some decent quality level of play, and they can earn a good paycheck. And yeah, the MLS is going to want to grow its product because it's an expanding league, improve the quality of their product and their domestic league. And one of the best ways to do that is to encourage talent to come over that can't be retained financially because of money rules. The J League, Podolski, Iniesta, Hulk, Torres. The J League is a decent quality league as well. People knock things like the A League and the J League and the MLS, but I actually kind of enjoy watching that kind of more open end-to-end style of play where there's a little less structure and there's a little less overcoaching where it's a little bit more flexible. The quality level is that little bit less, so it's actually more entertaining. It's an entertaining watch. I do suggest you do watch a J League game or an MLS game. People go, "Oh, the quality is not very good. It's not the highest." It's actually exceptionally entertaining. If you just watch it as a neutral and you sit back and you casually watch it, You will be entertained because it's so open, because there's a lot of mistakes and there's a lot of openness in play. If you're watching it intensely, like I would go, okay, the quality isn't great. But if you just watch it, go, I'm not going to do this for, because I obviously, if I'm watching a game, it's primarily because I'm going to do a review on the channel, or do a breakdown of it on the channel with a match review. So when I watch like an MLS game, if I do actually watch one, or a J League game, I watch it in a more relaxed way because I'm just watching it for the enjoyment. You know, I'm just watching it for the enjoyment, not because I'm trying to dissect it, or break down the game. I'm watching it because it's open, it's entertaining, and yes, the quality still is that little bit lower. So there are more mistakes, and the players aren't as fit as a Premier League or a La Liga side, or a Serie A side, or a Bundesliga or a French league side. They haven't got quite the same level of intensity and fitness as a European, like Champions League or Europa League quality team. But it is entertaining. You can see they're putting 100%, 110% of effort in. They're not paid as much, so they are, a lot of these players are playing more for the love of the game. Some of them are actually good enough to play in Europe. It is kind of refreshing watching a different style. It is more open. They've I have to admit, the J League and the MLS, there's some good technical players out there as well, who are very good on their feet, very good technically, very good at using the space, and opening up their body, and good passing combinations, good pass and move. And there's some good goalkeepers out there as well. I've seen some fantastic saves, and I've seen some pretty funky goals as well. Um, so I wouldn't knock these leagues. They're just a different style and a different quality, but they're just as entertaining, if not more so, because there's a little bit more naivety in the play. So it's a little bit more refreshing, seeing them not just go to the corner to wind the clock down. They want to keep, playing until the final whistle, which is a bit refreshing, to see. And some of the goals scored are actually quite good quality as well. There are some thunder crackers scored from like 30, 40 yards, and there are some pretty cheeky skills. I have done a brief history of the MLS like about 4 years ago, so I have to sort of update that because the league has expanded since I did the last MLS video. But just type MLS in on the search bar. There is a history video of the MLS. I did it, I think, about 4 years ago. So you have to bear that in mind when I did the video. Into Miami, for example, and Atlanta and Nashville. I think Atlanta might have just entered the league, but Nashville and Into Miami hadn't. So the league is bigger now than what it was when I did the video. And a lot's changed with the MLS between when I did that video and now. But yes, I have done a brief history on the MLS back in 2018, so I have to revisit that and amend what I posted. I have to do an updated history on the MLS. Although Kawasaki winning 4 of the last 6 does lower it for me. They built a good side. They know what they need to do to win. You can't knock a side for winning, but you can knock a side for not putting the right team together or not playing very well. You can go, well, why is this side not playing well? And you can break down, is it because of their squad, their style of play, their tactics? Is it the players? Is it the manager? Is there issues in the dressing room? Are they? If it's a salary cap league like the MLS or the J League, where there is a salary cap, have they got their salary cap all wrong? Have they got some bad contracts? I wouldn't knock a team for winning. They figured out how to win, and it's also proven they don't win every season because 2 other teams have won in those other 2 seasons. So they don't win all the time. They just win a lot of the time because they're the team to beat. So other teams have got to match that level, or bloody loose hair, or beat that level. I have not done. I've done videos on the A League, partly because I remember their VAR failed in their grand final 4 years ago, which was very embarrassing because they were one of the 2 leagues at the time that were using VAR in the build-up to the 2018 World Cup. But I haven't done any history videos on the J League or the A League, no. I can definitely look into the A League and the J League, but I've not done any history on them. It's a difficult one because a lot of European fans don't give. They're very toxic in regards to, oh, this league isn't of good quality, therefore it doesn't deserve the attention. But I could quite easily do a video on Eintracht I've done a video on Eintracht Frankfurt. FC Kaiserslautern, a team that people forget about, that's actually won Bundesligas and German Cups and Super Cups and played in the Champions League and the Cup Winners' Cup and things like that. People write off the Dutch League and the Portuguese League, even though multiple Champions League winners or European Cup winners have come from the Portuguese and Dutch leagues in their existence, more so than the French league. Yet the French league has got a high UEFA coefficient. Who knew? The outcome they had to do with what the referee called on the field. They went with an on-field call, and the game finished 1-0. So it was actually crucial when the VAR failed. The goal was stood, and ironically, looking at replays, it should have stood, but the referee and the officials weren't 100% sure. They go to the VAR, guys, we need to double check this just in case, because it was quite a close offside call, and during the review it crashed, so they had to go with the on-field decision, which was a goal. Replays later showed that it was the correct decision, but it wasn't a good look for the technology going in days before the World Cup was due to start in Russia in 2018. But the outcome was that it was a 1-0 result, and the side that won on the back of VAR not working. Gary Lineker is the answer to the England player who played at the 92 Euros and in the J League. Gary Lineker is the answer to that question. Give us a harder one, please. That's a well-known fact, but I was alive at the time and you weren't. So there we go. I've done a lot of videos today, so my brain's a bit. Bleh. I've done about 10 history videos and 2 news videos or something, or 10 videos in total. But yes, Gary Lineker is the player who played in the J League in '92 and at the '92 Euros, and it was his last international appearance was against Sweden when Brolin wins the game, and it didn't go very well for us. And Alan Smith replaced Gary Lineker that day. The Arsenal Irish Alan Smith, not the Leeds and Man United Alan Smith. But yes, so a lot of club histories today. And yes, I did get a Birmingham City club history video up on the channel as promised. I did look into Birmingham City. I haven't obviously looked into the ownership situation, but I am aware there is an investigation into the Cambodian diplomat link with the ownership group. And there was some news about the stadium situation as well in some of the local West Midlands websites and press. So, as I said in the Birmingham City history video, as I say, I do hope the stadium situation gets resolved and the capacity doesn't get reduced further, and those capacity restrictions are lifted. My thoughts on VAR. I've been quite clear. I've been quite honest in my view on how VAR is used. I think back in 2018 at the World Cup, that was a good basis to take the technology forward and tweak it a little bit. They didn't need to do massive amounts to change how the technology was implemented. Please don't lag. Back in 2018 at the World Cup, I didn't think they needed to do that much in change to what we saw at the World Cup. I think there was like 2 or 3 decisions that were 50-50. I think 1 or 2 they got wrong, but I think 90% of the decisions were thumbs up from me. The areas where I think VAR needed fixing was speed taken to come to a decision, and the remit, the area it covers. So, what the remit of VAR is? What areas does it impact the decision making when it comes to officials? Giving foul, giving free kicks, red cards, yellow cards, penalties, offsides, etc. Where I think FIFA and UEFA and the domestic FAs got things wrong with VAR was the experimental rule variations they brought in for the 2019 Women's World Cup. And I think at that tournament, firstly, they're using the women's game as a guinea pig, which I felt was wrong. So if anything went wrong, less people are watching, it's less important. So I think FIFA really screwed over the women's game in 2019. The new rule variations they brought in with the interpretation of deliberate and accidental handball and where the goalkeeper's got to stand on the line for a penalty has caused further complications. And when you've got to draw lines on the TV screen, That's too close to call. That's not clear and obvious. That's very, very tight. So I think they need to look at the interpretation of offside, which back in my day was you're clear of the last foot of the last man. There's a clear gap between you and the last defender. Um, which I've actually got the old rule book from 1992. Actually, I've got a book on all the laws from '92, and the back pass, the goalie could still pick it up. There you go. That's how old that rule book is. It's a little handbook for football, soccer rules for beginners. And it's also got some fun facts about the game in it. And the offside rule then is interpreted 30 years later completely differently to the offside rule now. So the wording of the rule and the interpretation of what is offside and how much, what part of your body. If you can't score a goal with your hand or your arm, why is that offside? If you cannot control the ball as an outfield player or score with this limb, why would this limb be offside if you cannot use it in open play? So how can that's where I think the interpretation of offside is wrong. And if I could dig out that, I think I've got basically my mother's coming around in a couple of days, and she's got a lot of my old books from when I was a kid, and she's bringing over some of my collectibles, sport and engineering memorabilia. Yes, I'm a train spotter. I like me my steam trains. I'm not gonna lie, and my old locomotives. So yes, I will be doing a live stream on the other channel in regards to I don't know if you can see, but on that white chair over there, there's a stack of about 10, 15 railway books. So, yeah, I'm a bit of a bit of a railway nerd. I'm a bit of a Sheldon Cooper when it comes to railways, basically. And I'm 32. So. And But that's one of my sports books. That's, I think, really important because it does tell you the basics of the game. And there's only, I think, 2 rules, and there's actually rules in there. So a shirt pull. So if someone's pulling your shirt, that's an automatic yellow card. That's what it says in the laws of football. A deliberate shirt pull of any nature, yellow card straight away. Dissent, automatic yellow card straight away. So yes, I would like to see football refs with cams and microphones, like they have in rugby league and rugby union, with and ice hockey, where the ref is fully mic'd up, and when they make a decision, and they're talking to the players, the audience at home and in the stadium can hear what the referee's saying. You notice, like in ice hockey, they will pick up players effing and blinding, and they are given a warning. They are told, right, cut that crap out. You continue with the foul and abusive language, that will be a 2-minute minor or a 5-minute major game misconduct, or a misconduct penalty, and that is a coach killer in ice hockey. And rugby union, you will rarely hear a player f bomb to a referee. I think the most famous incident was with Dylan Hartley and Wayne Barnes, where Dylan Hartley, the Northampton Saints captain, former England captain, called the referee Wayne Barnes an effing cheat. He mouthed off at him and said, "You're an effing cheat," and straight away. No, you can swear in rugby union and rugby league, but it's if you swear at the official, that's an automatic penalty, an extra 10 metres. If you've been warned about conduct and you do it again, that's a yellow card. And if you then question the referee's integrity or really keep abusing him, it's a straight red. Dylan Hartley basically shouting abuse at Wayne Barnes, wasn't happy with the decision, and I clearly was frustrated because it was a winner takes all game going through to the Premiership final. He called him an effing cheat, fucking cheat. He f-bombed him, but he accused him of favouring the other side. Now, Wayne Barnes is a controversial referee. I'm a massive fan of Wayne Barnes, but questioning the referee's integrity straight off, and he got a lengthy ban for that and a hefty fine from the RFU and the Premiership. He got a lengthy ban, and he missed, I think, a couple of England games as well. Rugby league, I've had a few f-bombs as well, and then, again, who was it who got suspended a couple of seasons ago? Fanua Blake. He also did a similar thing where he got right in the referee's face, and he was giving him a spray, and it was all picked up on microphone. He was effing this, effing that, you effing C. He was dropping F bombs and C bombs and S bombs, and he was sent off after the final whistle. So he was given a send off, which is an automatic 1 game suspension anyway. And then when they reviewed the footage, he got like 4 or 5 games for an abuse of an official, and I think a $10,000 fine, Australian dollar fine. And that impacted the Manly Sea Eagles in the 2020 season because they had a shocking season that year. And it wasn't long after that that he was moved on to the New Zealand Warriors. That cost him his place in the Manly Sea Eagles side. The management went, "We're moving you on," and he was an unhappy player anyway. We're like, "We'll get you out your contract 6 months early. You're going to the Warriors now." It was a mid-season switch, but he got suspended. And I have seen abuse of an official as a penalty for 2 or 5 minutes in an ice hockey. I've seen players ejected for unsportsmanlike conduct, abuse of an official, 10-minute game misconduct, and then a game penalty and a match penalty, and thrown out and suspended. I've seen it. I've even seen it in the National League here in the UK, which is the one below the Elite League, and the referees aren't mic'd up, and I've seen them toss players out of the game. Like, no, you're not even getting 2 or 5. You're getting done for a game. And if it's a game penalty, it doesn't result in a suspension, but that's you done for the evening unless they review it later and upgrade. But if it's a match penalty, you're done. You're suspended. You're getting games. And so I've seen it. So I do think, and dissent is an automatic yellow card. Diving simulation, automatic yellow card. That's back in 1992. Those rules have not changed. It's just the referees are too scared to book players. And so that's why I know I've gone off on a tangent discussing other sports, but that's why I feel they should be mic'd up and have cameras. And I think they got a little body cam and a microphone. The players will very, very quickly, because there'll be lots of video evidence of them claiming, "Oh, it wasn't me, ref, calling you and effing this." It's like, well, you're on camera and you're on microphone and you're in my eye line. And that can be used again. The players will very, very quickly cut that out. Massively. Massively cut it out. I think the most famous suspension for a player disrespecting an official was Steve Blocker Roach for the Balmain Tigers, where he taps the referee on the head, which is an automatic 5 game, and then he swears at the touch judge, calling him a lot of unsavoury things, and he got like, what was it, half a season for that? I think he missed finals, and I think it cost him his place in the Test side. Back in, I think, 88, 87, 88, I think. He got a lengthy suspension. That's before the referees are mic'd up with the occasional body cam, and he was off. Who is my favourite Serie A team? Atalanta. Who's winning the Serie A next season? Juventus, Inter, or AC Milan. I think it could be an underdog, like an Atalanta or a Sassuolo or a Roma or a Lazio or Napoli. I think Serie A is more open now than it has been in the last 20 years. I think we could have a first-time winner or a winner who hasn't won it in a while, like a Roma or a Lazio or a Napoli. I do honestly think the decline of Juventus, the changing of the guard with AC and Inter, swapping titles. I do think, for example, do what Cagliari did in 1970, or a Hellas Verona in '86. We could have a first-time winner, or we could have a new winner who hasn't won it in a while, like a Lazio or a Roma or a Napoli. Di Maria, I think Pogba, we don't know where he's going to end up, and every other Juventus fan I've come across goes, he's talented but lazy and his attitude stinks. And Di Maria is getting old. He's a good player, but he can be hit and miss. And Chiesa is coming back from a lengthy injury layoff. While he's a very good young talented player, if Juventus continue to misfire, he might be tempted away by another club, and he might end up in the Premier League. I can see Chiesa at some point playing elsewhere in Europe because he is that good. So we'll wait and see with Juventus. And yes, Juventus have won, I think, 60% of the titles in Serie A or something. They've won a lot more than AC and Inter. I think they've won more titles than AC and Inter combined. Although Inter Milan had, I think, the longest winning streak in Italian football, um, and were the first team to win, I think, 3 titles or 4 titles in a row. Inter Milan were um, the Grande Inter side of the 60s and the 70s was only interrupted by Cagliari in 1970. There was a period where Inter Milan were more dominant than Juventus for a period, and I'm gonna have to do some history videos on Italian clubs because I think I haven't I haven't done that yet. And the Cagliari side with Gigi Riva up front, well, actually on the wing, broke up the Grande Inter side. It actually disrupted their unbeaten, title run that they had, and and that's really interesting. And then you've got the Hellas Verona side of '86, who won their one and only Serie A title. And then you've got clubs like, Lazio and Roma, who have massively underachieved, massively. And then you've got Napoli, who had their purple patch with Maradona, and Torino, who've actually got a bigger fan base in Turin than Juventus. You've got Udinese, the Friulian provincial side. There's a lot of clubs in Italy. You've got Bologna, Sampdoria, Genova, um, you know, Regina, Bari. So there's a lot of clubs I could definitely Fiorentina is one of my favourite clubs. With some of the players, I do have a lot of time for Fiorentina because some of the players you've played for Fiorentina. Oh, Batistuta, what a player! Hernan Crespo as well, obviously Parma and Inter. Zanetti, Inter legend. So there are some of the Italian clubs I have a little soft spot for. Perugia is a club that I have a soft spot for, and I've got a soft spot for Perugia as a city as well. I've been to Perugia many times. It's a lovely little city, very historical little place in Umbria, and I've got a little soft spot for Perugia. I like Fiorentina as well, but Atalanta's my Italian team. I always go for the underdog, and there's my three underdogs. But you've got Sampdoria, you've got Genova, Modena, Bologna, Palermo, Cagliari in Sardinia, Catania. There are some real fun clubs that I could do club histories on. Palermo they've gone bust. I think they're in the fourth division now, or Serie D or Serie C2 or something. Really gone down the pan at Palermo. There's been a lot of money like very similar to Parma. A lot of money issues have impacted at Palermo since they had players like Grosso on their books. And even Lecce, another club. I know a fair bit about Italian football. It's bizarre. But yeah, there's definitely some Italian clubs I could do some club histories on. And I think some very underrated Italian clubs that have actually had some success and get overlooked. And then I could look at some of the Dutch clubs like Feyenoord and PSV Eindhoven, Ajax, Sparta Rotterdam. So it's not just the Ajax show in Holland. You got Breda and Utrecht. So yeah, there's definitely James Richardson. I do miss him on Channel 4 on a Saturday and a Sunday with the Gazzetta dello Sport and some of his interviews he did with players like some brilliantly Paul Ince, Gaza, David Platt. There were some really really good players that who were English who went over to play in Italy. There's some good English players played in Germany as well and Spain. So there's been some fantastic players that this country's produced that have played overseas, and we're starting to see that again. Some young players, obviously, like Bellingham, for example, plying their trade in Germany, and some players at the end of their careers, like Smalling, for example, playing for Roma. and really enjoying his football again, which he wasn't at the end at Man United. Um, so it is good to see sometimes, young and veteran, English players giving it a go overseas and enjoying it and being successful. I think that's really important, and that's something we didn't in the 80s and the 90s, and we didn't in the 2000s and the 2010s. And I think that's where we struggled in that period. Is some of our veteran and young players weren't experiencing that overseas experience, which we did in the 80s and the 90s and now. And that's where I think the national side also struggled as well. Um, um, I think Juventus, I think their period of dominance is at an end for now. They're in the same position as Man United. And the Juventus tifosi, the fans, are going to be very impatient. They're not going to accept too long a rebuild, and that's the problem. It's the same problem Man United are facing right now. Is the fans will not be accepting and won't be patient of a rebuild taking more than a couple of seasons. But that's why I think it's going to be really interesting in Italian football at the moment, because I think it's completely opened up a Pandora's box of every club. I think in the top 8 or 9, definitely the top half of the table, could win the Scudetto. I honestly believe that. I honestly believe the Italian football is more open for the league title for the first time in, I would say, 15, 20 years. Is the most open we've seen it since the Calciopoli scandal. I think this is the moment that Italian football's been waiting for. The national side's got to rebuild, and the domestic league is suddenly the most competitive it's been since the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think that is massively important for Italian football, that is the case, that suddenly loads of sides are fighting to win, because then the talent's been more evenly spread. Lots of sides are being more competitive, and it's a healthier league. A more competitive league is a healthier league, and therefore the national side will benefit, because lots of teams are competing to promote their youth system, build up the quality. They're all fighting for the Italian Cup, the Italian Super Cup, the Serie A. They're fighting for the European places. They're fighting for the European final. That kind of thing, vitally important, vitally important. That's the sign of a healthy league, and it hasn't been healthy for a very, very long time. The fact that AC Milan hadn't won for 11 years, it had been the Juventus show for a period and the Inter show for a period, wasn't good for the league. So the fact that AC win the title for the first time in 11 years and Inter won the title for the first time in a long time was massively, massively important for the Italian league. And I think it will have positive impacts for the national side going forward in the next couple of years, helping them bounce back from missing out on the World Cup. And they are, they've just won the Euros, but they're not quite ready. I think the Italian side haven't quite fixed a lot of the issues they had going into the Euros with Mancini. He's still figuring out how to get things better. Yeah, Napoli, long time without the title, but they weren't very successful before Maradona. But yes, Napoli, they could. Lazio, there's a lot of sides that are in the discussion again, which haven't been in the discussion for a long time, like Roma, Lazio, Napoli, Atalanta, Sassuolo have suddenly got in the discussion somehow. And Inter and AC swapping titles, that's something that hasn't happened for over a decade. And then you've got Juventus not winning a title for back-to-back seasons. That doesn't happen. Hasn't happened for a long time since the Calciopoli scandal, 2006. So that hasn't happened for a long time. So suddenly the league is competitive again, and suddenly there's excitement, and loads of clubs are now saying we've got to develop players, we've got to compete for the youth talent, and trying to attract Italian talent back and overseas talent in, and it's suddenly becoming an exciting league to look at again, and hasn't been that way for a long time, and that has impacted the national side over the last 16 years since the World Cup win. Yes, they've won the Euros, but it's been a bit of at times a stutter. They haven't always looked the Italy of old. And They missed qualifications and they've struggled at tournaments and they haven't made it out of group stages. And suddenly they win the Euros. Yes, they just missed out on the World Cup, but I think the congested schedule has impacted them missing out on the World Cup. But I do think suddenly, yeah, a team winning in Europe. Um, and it's Roma, and that was their third attempt at a European final. They finally get over the line. Um, Third time lucky. So there's a lot to feel happy about if you're an Italian fan, and there's a lot to feel happy about if you follow the Italian league, which hasn't been the case for a long, long time. So it's more competitive, it's more fun, and not that long ago you had Atalanta make a Champions League semi-final. Roma have just won a European trophy. Uh, I think Inter got to a European final last year. So there's nice signs that things are improving again, back to where they were in the old days, as I say, 20, 30 years ago. There's definite green shoots of improvement, which will ultimately benefit the national side in the long run. But I think the Juventus fans will not be patient enough for the rebuild. I think there's going to be frustration at Juve if they don't win the title this coming season, which I don't think they will. And then you have the situation at Juve, which is happening at Manchester United. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I do think it's important that the Italian league suddenly become very, very competitive again, which is exceptionally important because it just is. It is massively important that you have this competitiveness again, which hasn't been there for a long, long time domestically. And with the MLS being competitive, do you think that will benefit the national team? To a certain extent. Obviously, the difference in North America is their football association, US Soccer, their federation doesn't govern in any way, shape, or form the MLS because it's a franchise model. It's the MLS Board of Governors who govern the domestic game at club level over there. The national side can put in the youth pathways and the grassroots pathways in place to an extent. The collegiate system has now picked up the game. The game has grown massively, but the governance side of the game is completely different in North America than it is over here. But I do think the MLS, becoming more competitive and the sport growing, and with the very likely possibility that a lot of European talent or European-based talent will look to the US when UEFA brings in their new spending rules and financial rules to replace the current financial fair play system that we have. I think will benefit the MLS into the medium to long term. So I do think at some point, yes, but I think there needs to be a better cooperation between the MLS and the US Federation when it comes to developing the grassroots, the building blocks, the sporting infrastructure. And what I mean by that is not the stadium infrastructure itself, but the pathways, the building blocks that are in place. Developing the youth talent, working in developing the minor league system, that kind of thing. So I do think there needs to be better cooperation between the league and the federation. But it's looking a lot better now than what it was before David Beckham goes over. So 20 years ago, the MLS was in a real state that this league could fail. And David Beckham is basically that catalyst that blows up the league. Basically, it creates that attention on the league because international sporting figure chooses lesser league in America to play in. And you could argue that David Beckham is the turning point for the MLS, and then players like Gerrard and Kaká and Pirlo come over there. The MLS peaks for a little bit, it plateaus, and then Ibrahimovic. David Beckham and Ibrahimovic are the moments where the spotlight goes on the league, the investment massively increases, the revenues go up, the international attention looks at it. People go, "Oh, Beckham and Ibrahimovic done." They don't finish their careers in the MLS. They go back to Europe to continue to win trophies. at the clubs they play at. It was just a stepping stone for them. At a time, people are going, they're done, they're going to retire. They don't. And no one knows what's going to happen with Ibrahimovic. We'll have to see if he decides to go one more season. He's got an 8 month layoff. He's just had a knee replacement. He's going to be out of action for at least 6 to 8 months. Um, so we'll see. Do a Juventus history. It will be a long one. But one fact I do know about Juventus, I know where they get their strips from and their idea for their kit. Notts County gave them their first kit back in the day. Juventus formed the club, didn't have a kit. And Notts County had slightly changed their striping design, the thickness of the stripes or something. And the Notts County owner knew the Juventus founders, because there was a lot of British involvement with the establishment of Italian football, and they didn't have a kit. They went, there you go. And that's why they play in stripes. Notts County are the reason why every other team that plays in black and white stripes plays in black and white stripes. That is the reason, is Notts County. And US fans go, why do they look like referees? Because obviously in the NHL and the NFL, the referees and Major League Baseball wear the black and white stripes. But every team that plays in vertical black and white stripes plays in those colours because of Notts County. Notts County were the only club at the time that they're founded that are playing in black and white stripes. Also, I can name you the 4 clubs in English football that play in claret and blue. 2 of them are founders of the Football League. One of them has just been relegated out of the Football League, and one of them has got to their first European semi-final in forever, and that's Aston Villa, Burnley, Scunthorpe United, and West Ham United. There's your claret and blues. I think you've got Corinthians, Santos, Udinese, Juventus, Newcastle, Notts County, Siena back in the day when they were a Serie A club. There's a reason why those clubs play in black and white stripes. Not hoops, stripes. But Notts County were the first. Newcastle United were the second team to do so. And I believe Notts County helped them out with a kit as well. Juventus were supposed to have red because of Nottingham Forest, but the shirt came back white and black, and Notts County. Yeah, that's one of the jokes, is the wrong Nottingham club. Grimsby, yeah, Grimsby. Green hoops, that would be Celtic. Yeovil. Gods. Shit, who else? Not a lot of teams play in green. Forest Green Rovers do, but their kits are actually loosely based on the Arsenal design with green and white sleeves, traditionally Forest Green Rovers. Yeovil have also gone to that way in recent years with their main green, white sleeves. Sort of a tribute to Arsenal. Sporting Lisbon, yeah. The Lisbon Lions, I think, has something to do with that, with Celtic winning in Lisbon, wearing the green and white hoops. I think that could be why Sporting Lisbon changed their colour scheme. I'm not 100% sure of that. Sassuolo do not wear green and white hoops, though. They have got a green shirt, but they've got to change that in a season or two's time because Italian FA rules are changing, so they can't have green as a primary colour. There's a team in Berkshire or London who wear hoops like Newcastle, found by mine as a non-league team. What? No, there's no team in Berkshire. Maidenhead United, maybe? Yeah, Maidenhead United play in black and white, and they're not. I think it might be Maidenhead United. They play in black and white stripes, not hoops. Hoops go across the body, stripes go down. It's Maidenhead United. They're the team in Berkshire that also play. It's a kit that's basically Newcastle's. I'm trying to think. Leighton Orient's kit is very similar to Arsenal because they also used to play south of the river. Arsenal obviously played at Woolwich, and Leighton Orient is playing Clapham. Reading are blue and white, yep. Like QPR, Queen's Park Rangers. I've got to look at some of the more obscure reasons why clubs play in the colours they do. Palermo obviously play in pink as their home kit. Um, the reason why Arsenal play in red with white sleeves is because of Nottingham Forest, back in the day when clubs used to help each other out. Um, and Accrington as well, also playing with red with traditionally with white sleeves as well. Blackburn, blue and white checks or halves. Um, that wasn't our original kit. Preston North End, white with black shorts. Um, Blackpool are the only team to play in orange, or tangerine technically is the colour, Tangerine Army. Fleetwood Town, they also play in a similar kit to Arsenal's. I think Arsenal has a reason. There's a reason why Arsenal and Fleetwood Town have the same kit design. What other ones are there? There are some really bizarre ones. Exeter City play in the same kit design as Southampton and Sunderland, which is red and white stripes. Hibs, Hibs are another team playing green. Hibs, I forgot Hibs. Hanwell Town is technically, if we're being really anal, is in Surrey, not London. I'm trying to think now. There's some really obscure ones like red and blue, Aldershot Town. There's some really bizarre ones now with some really weird. Plymouth Argyle playing green with white sleeves traditionally. Bristol Rovers play in the same kit design as Blackburn, blue and white checks or halves. Bristol City are playing red and white. Swindon play in red and white. Blythe Spartans. There's one for you. They play in green. Northwich Victoria play in green. Oh God, there are some really. I'm Tranmere playing all white, like Spurs. Everton's original name was San Domingo, and their original stadium was Anfield. And Everton technically is an old district of Lancashire, because Merseyside wasn't called Merseyside; it was actually Lancashire back in the day. And Birkenhead technically was part of Cheshire back in the day. Oh, like Newton Heath, yellow and green. There you go. Do I think Norwich? Norwich is a canary yellow and green. Yeah. Oh, Coleman's mustard. The only professional team in Norfolk. Sean Lachlan, I'm actually kind of glad Sean Lachlan has actually been recognised for his contributions, not just to rugby league but to sport. Quite frankly, I'm surprised he went as long as he did. Sean Lachlan, a fantastic servant to the game. It's a pity the World Cup is taking place this year and not last year, because I think he would have played in the World Cup last year, and that would have been a fitting send-off for Sean Lachlan. So it is a shame that he won't be playing in this year's World Cup. It's a massive loss for England. Massive loss. Veteran forward, massive prop. Like the guy's massive. Absolutely massive player. I think he's another one of those players that I think, alongside like James Graham and Adrian Morley, should have gone and played alongside them in the NRL, and Sam Burgess, and done the NRL route of things. The worst home and away kits I've seen. God, there's been Liverpool's green and white and with red sponsorship away kit in the '96 FA Cup final. The weird play on sort of Blackburn's style of green and white, that was horrific. That '96 away kit was just. There was one of the sharp Viacom Man United ones that was pretty vile. There was a Blackburn away kit that was black and red halves, which I didn't like. Looked too much like Man United, actually. But I didn't like it at all. Chelsea with the fluorescent yellowy green. Wasn't keen on that. Man City's alternate third this year with that Puma really screwed up a lot of kits this year. Worst home kit. God. Rushton and Diamonds was a bit of an epileptic seizure back in the day, but Diamonds being in the name and playing in Rushton, I think they were allowed a bit of a wild one. The Rushton Diamonds kit back in the day was a bit of a headache. Um, bit of a 90s disco theme going on there. Um, I can't think of some. There's been the odd alternate third or the occasional like European third away or something, but nothing. I think the Liverpool one of '96 for the FA Cup final was a pretty iconically bad one that I seem to remember. I think Man United's grey sharp Viacom one in the mid to late '90s was another one that I wasn't overly keen on. I think Spurs is all yellow away kit of '96 when they had HP Hewlett Packard sponsorship. Wasn't over or Holston Pills, was it Hewlett Packard? The Spurs kit wasn't overly great in the late away kit in the mid to late '90s, but the '90s was a period when there was some really bad, really, really. Oof. Um, the Wimbledon kits went through a bit of a phase where they weren't quite the true AFC Wimbledon colours of the crazy game in the mid '90s. There were some Arsenal ones which were a little bit borderline not keen on with the JVC sponsorship. There was one or two, but Arsenal fans fondly remember them. And that's going back when Steve Bolden, Tony Adams, and Nigel Winterburn were still playing for the club. That dates that one. Man City's AC Milan style one just didn't look right, but it is actually iconic. But at the time, I think it's AC Milan because George Ware obviously played for Man City for a season and he wore that same kit at home for obviously AC Milan and he wearing that as an away kit for Man City. It didn't quite feel right, if that makes sense. Obviously, Leeds wearing yellow is as a away kit is pretty standard fare. And the Leeds yellow was like a custody daffodil yellow, so it wasn't as bright as some of the yellow away kits. Liverpool 1997 with the red Carlsberg, that was a very bright kit. There were some bad kits in the '94 World Cup. The France kit in the mid '90s. Oh, at the time was seen as pretty cool, but looking back, not keen on that Adidas kit. That was a bit garish. The Germany kit from USA '94 looked like it had come out of East Germany in the late '80s, and they were, a bit of communism there. There was a couple of England kits I wasn't overly keen on at times. Wasn't overly keen on some of the England kits. But I wouldn't say I've seen. I think a lot of kits now have lost that uniqueness though. They're very generic in style, and I think some of the goalie kits were more horrific and horrendous than the actual mainstream kits. Some of the goalie kits of the '90s were really bad. Oh God, the Southampton pony. Oh yeah, no. With the Friends Provident, wasn't keen on that neck design. Not a bad kit, but that neck design, the neck just didn't feel overly good for me. But I like the old Sanderson sponsorship. I did like the old Letizia era Southampton kits, but the post Letizia, the St Mary's, early St Mary's era, wasn't keen on those kits. The Ricky Lambert era as well, wasn't overly keen on some of those Southampton kits. They weren't the traditional Southampton kits of old. But I wouldn't say. Um, I think more the goalkeeping kits of the '90s were pretty ridiculous, and some of the international kits of the '90s were a bit funky. Um, it was like the '90s. Oh, we finally got like Windows 93 or Windows DOS or Windows 95. Let's play with Windows Paint, and it was like graphic designers were were going mad. No, I liked the Dr. Martens West Ham feeder kit. That was actually one of my favourite kits of the era because that one could still work today. That was ahead of its time. That was not too crowded. It wasn't too mental. Um, that was actually a kit that I felt Fila pulled out the bag. Fila pulled that one out the top drawer for quality, and that was actually quite a good kit. That's a cult classic, Decanio. That Decanio era, Slaven Bilic era, Thomas Repka era, West Ham. No, that for me is one of my favourite kits. Even though I'm not a West Ham fan, I would love to get my hands on that Dr. Martens era West Ham kit. That is a fantastic kit. I think one of the best kits ever worn in the Premier League. The neckline was beautiful. They got the tones of claret and blue right. Yeah. That for me is an iconic kit of the late 90s, 2000s. They blew that one out of the water. The 90s Sheffield Wednesday as well, with the blue and white stripes with black shorts. When Decanio gets sent off for pushing over the referee before he moves on. That Sheffield Wednesday kit of the mid to late 90s is up there as well with the Sanderson sponsorship. That's another good kit. That's criminally underrated. Those were two kits of the 90s that don't look out of place today and have aged really well. The Man City kit of 96 as well, the lighter sky blue. That's the best Man City kit I think of ever. They got the sky blue right, the goalie green kit with the blue short. That is another kit that's aged rather well. And I think now the Man City kit doesn't quite get that sky blue as it's not pastely enough. That pastel sky blue they wore in the 95-96 season, Man City is, I think, their best kit. Personally, it's their best kit. With the brother computer tech company sponsorship, that is Man City's best kit. Not their best era of football, but that's their best kit. The old Coventry kit from the Darren Huckabee era, I think that's a criminally underrated kit as well. So yeah, there were some kits from the 90s that wouldn't look out of place right now that I think have aged really well. You can tell they're 90s kits, but they've aged really, really well. And then there are some that really belong in a museum of bad design. Oh, for God, the green and blue away. Oh, yeah. And the old Leeds logo before the current one. I preferred that Leeds United logo of the mid 94-95 season and the 95-96 season compared to the logo they have now. I preferred that Leeds United logo. I felt that was the better logo. I think that was the better crest. And the way the blue worked with the kit was a bit more gentle with that little yellow bordering was bang on there. I think I'm not overly keen on the Leeds kit right now. Just there's something about it. I think the neckline isn't right. I'm one of those aesthetically pleasing kind of, but the 90s, the mid 90s was, I think, I was saying the 94 to 99 seasons. So that period in the 90s, the Premier League was my favourite period in the Premier League. That was my favourite era of the Premier League. Looking back on it, the Barnsley kit of their one season in the Premier League, the Bradford City kit with the JCT 600 sponsorship. I actually liked that kit. and their colours are almost unique for their striping. And their colours, as the Bantams, is almost fuck off, bloody Mozzie. I will kill you, you fuckwit. Die. Oh, piss off. Right, I've just killed a mosquito. Um, um, Thoughts on Birmingham now the EFL actually investigate? Can it ever become normal at Birmingham again? Well, the EFL have failed in this case because the director's test hasn't worked. Because if they had properly done the director's test, this takeover from when Carlson Young's ownership to this current shambles wouldn't have happened. If they properly enforced the director's test, Carlson Young doesn't buy the club. So, in my opinion, the EFL have failed Birmingham for over a decade, decade and a half, 15 years. They've been let down by the EFL. It's time for the EFL to actually take responsibility for the mess they've helped create. And I'm not lying. I think the EFL has contributed to the situation of Birmingham City massively over the last, 14, 15, 16 years by not properly enforcing the director's test. The fact the club has been investigated before. And clubs like Birmingham City, Derby County, Bury, Macclesfield. Well, Bury and Macclesfield have gone out of business, so that just shows how badly run the Football League has been since even before '92. There's a reason why the Premier League exists. There was a game that was in crisis, and it was, but there is a reason why the Football League has lost a whole division to what is now the Premier League. There's a reason why Oldham Athletic, for example, a founding club of the Premier League, is now in the non-league. There's a reason why Derby County were docked so many points last season, and Bury and Macclesfield have gone bust. Now, COVID did obviously impact Macclesfield more than people realise, and that did have a massive hit on the club's finances that were already struggling. But that's that thing, it's the director's test. All four of these clubs are in this situation because the EFL has failed in enforcing and using its own rules. The wage bill was out of kilter because the players have got some pretty effective agents. But then again, you have to question the role of agents within the game, the transparency of transfers, the transparency of transfer payments. But those players have got agents who've got them a good deal. You don't blame the players, blame the system. Blame the system that's been created. The players aren't at fault, it's the system that's at fault. Scunthorpe's Scunthorpe, Darlington, Notts County, yep. Chester, Hereford United. The list is quite older shop, gone bust multiple times. RCO worked with Darren Dean on a 25k retainer, so RCO gave out the wages. Dear. I look, the wage bill is a problem. Oh, I forgot, everyone forgets Scarborough. The wage bill is a problem, but that's actually not the player's fault. And that's technically not the club's fault per se. That's what's happened with the system that's in place and the current rules that are in place. Because I don't blame the players, blame the system that's been created, and blame. You could sort of blame the agents to a certain extent. When I say that because not all player agents are bad people. It's a minority that ruin it for the majority. Some of those players have got very, very good agents who have got them a very, very good deal. And the club were willing to pay the wages. So the club were the ones who weren't willing to stand their ground, which then you have to wonder what's going on the recruitment side and what's going on with the ownership. Then you've also got to blame the culture within the sport and the system that's been created, the overinflated wages, the overinflated transfer market. And that's not the player's fault. That's the clubs and the agents overspending. And the agents going, well, this club's going to overspend. My client's going to get a nice payday. Whether they deserve it or not means I get a nice payday. And most agents are like, okay, look, this is the offer they've got on the table. You want to move here for family reasons, be back close to family, That's a good agent. A good agent will make sure his client is looked after. A bad agent will be like, let's negotiate a move that really the player doesn't want. But let's unsettle the player by feeding him rumours that this club's interested, that club's interested. They're not going to give you the contract extension you want. Let's break down the trust between the player and the club and the manager. Let's unsettle him because I can get my fee. Um, uh, Torquay's another one who've been COVID hampered them last season because if it wasn't for COVID, they get promoted. Um, all those suspended and delayed fixtures did them for them in their fixture congestion because other clubs had COVID outbreaks. Um, I wouldn't say Torquay's a completely busted club. I mean, I think COVID, unfortunately, with the fixture congestion, the fixture build-up in the National League last year, which did for Dover because they got a points deduction. Then they didn't do any promotion, or they scrapped relegation. But whilst when Lehman listing off a whole host of clubs, that's on the EFL and the failure of the directors' test and the financial fair play rules. That's a failure on the EFL to properly enforce its rules, and there's too many loopholes, and they're not doing their job properly. And so, yes, who will go down from League Two? You know, do you want to play the lottery? Because honestly, I do honestly believe like League Two and from the Championship to League Two, from one season to the next, a team like Barnsley, for example, playoff team last year, this year they're relegated. Derby, playoff team 2 years ago, now in League One. So, in reality, the Football League is such a roller coaster and so unpredictable that I don't want to put a prediction on that. Quite frankly, it's so unpredictable. I mean, Trevor Birch has come in and still hasn't made any change to the EFL. Sean Harvey was like Basilio. God, you're not holding your punches there, are you? The reason why the Premier League separated is the Division One clubs who resigned en masse. I think 16 of them resigned en masse, but it wasn't enough to fully form a league. So they basically spoke to some of the better Division Two clubs and those clubs that had just been relegated out of the Premier League, Division One, and said, "Look, do you want to come with us?" And they needed a minimum number of clubs to do it, and 16 wasn't enough. So 16 clubs just went, "We resign from the Football League. We're going to set up a Premier League." And they were actually the top 16 clubs in English football at the time. And then another 6 clubs joined them. So the 3 clubs that were relegated and the 3 clubs that were promoted, it made a mockery of the Football League. And they resigned from the Football League en masse and invited 6 more clubs to join them because they were dissatisfied with how the EFL were running things, the financial state of the game, stadium infrastructure, the TV deal, the fact that English clubs were still banned from Europe, a whole host of other things. They felt the FA and the EFL were not fighting their corner. There was a breakdown in trust, and ultimately it led to the creation of the Premier League. Now, we've seen Leeds' owner say, or chairman, a couple of years ago when Leeds was still a Championship club, saying we need a Premier League too. And again, there is that frustration with clubs that the TV deal isn't a good deal from what it was back in 1991-92 season with the revenue sharing. The Championship, League One and League Two clubs feel that the current TV deal percentages of just distribution of the media income isn't a fair deal. There's frustration with League One and League Two clubs calling for salary caps and transfer caps to make sure clubs don't go bust. And the EFL have done nothing in that regard to have meetings. And I think the Championship would actually agree with that. I think you would actually get a consensus from the majority, the 2/3 majority that would be required on a vote of that nature for it to pass. So yeah, the Birmingham City situation. Yeah, it is quite worrying what's happened to Birmingham City. But looking at the club's history, I'm actually surprised the lack of success and the fact you've actually, apart from two Football League trophies and two League Cups, so four trophies in total, and two European finals in the early 60s, that, yeah, Birmingham haven't had more success in silverware with the fact the club has been going for as long as it has, the rivalry with Villa. I am surprised that, yeah, the lack of success at Birmingham, but I do remember solid Premier League sides, solid squad, class players, decent, solid top flight players, a couple of really good players playing at the club back in the day, international level players. Um, I am surprised with the situation, and it's to do with the ownership. It is to do with the ownership. Um, but I would say you're going back to, you know, 30, 40 years ago. The ownership issue at Birmingham has been a long-standing problem since before Sullivan and Gold and Brady. We're talking the Kumars and Castle and Young. Almost every owner you've had since the late 80s, early 90s has been a concern for me with Birmingham City. And that predates the directors' test that the EFL has got in place and the Premier League has got in place now. But the off-field dramas with Birmingham is what's hurting the club, and that's my worry for Birmingham going forward. And if you've got a candidate for relegation and points deduction, Birmingham City is that. And that's the concern I have that could be a new Oldham Athletic, that could be a new Leeds United, a new Portsmouth, lurching from one crisis to the next, points deductions, administrations, you know, asset sales. The stadium issue is a concern that could be like another Coventry City. So yes, there are concerns. Now, imagine if you moved to the new Commonwealth Stadium like Man City did, leaving Main Road to go to the Manchester City Stadium after the Commonwealth Games. That could be a solution for Birmingham City if the right deal can be found, but I can't see it happening with the current ownership. Because the current ownership is just not fit for purpose. But if there was a decent owner there and they actually spoke to Birmingham City Council going, can we move into this stadium and do like a West Ham kind of agreement on a temporary basis until St Andrews can be brought up to spec, or even on a permanent basis? That might be a solution for some of the problems Birmingham City are facing. But the stadium issues, the ownership problems, the investigations by the EFL, I think it could be worse than that. I honestly think Birmingham could really implode. And our unknown bidder turned out to be Bassini and David Sullivan. Even when we could get newer owners, they are basket cases. That is a proper dig at your club, isn't it? This is a very angry fan base that has got no faith with the EFL or the FA to protect them from unscrupulous owners who are crooks. That's my opinion. Crooks. We could have another Sheffield Wednesday where there's a criminal fraud trial where's the money gone, and even a Portsmouth, where's the money gone? I think one solution for Birmingham is the Commonwealth Stadium being a solution, but it needs the right ownership, and the current ownership you have in place won't happen. Stagnate is the least of your worries. I fear an Oldham Athletic Bury situation where either you tumble out the Football League altogether, worse than Bradford. I think worse than Bradford City. I actually fear you could cease to exist. I think you could be in a situation like Derby County within 12 to 24 months or even sooner. And that really leaves a problem for the Football League then, because Derby County may be not able to start the season. Birmingham City may not be able to start the season. There could be a Bury-like situation. Now, if you can get a ball kicked and play a competitive game, they won't let you go bust. But if you can't get a ball kicked, they'll let you go bust. I genuinely fear for Derby and Birmingham this summer. I think it's worse than tumbling down the divisions. I think you could be out of business. I think we could have another Macclesfield or Bury on our hands, and a complete liquidation, not just administration, liquidation. and it's on the EFL. The EFL have allowed this to happen. Um, I'm not going to blame the players for getting paid the wages they are because they've instructed their agents to get them the best deal possible. I blame the system in that regard, the money side of it, the system that's in place. Um, Birmingham did house Coventry for a season. That is massively ironic, considering all things considered. That is quite funny, I do think. I mean, the owners won't sell. They only want to sell 20% so they can keep their Hong Kong listing alive. Hope the EFL force them to sell. Bidders are backing out because 21% is point. It's below the threshold for a compulsory takeover bid. A controlling stake, I think is the term. There's another bug that's going to die in a minute. Get away from my laptop. Get away from my laptop. Bloody bug. Oh no, because you've got the issue with Wasps also using the stadium, and three teams cannot use that stadium because it's owned by Wasps. So it's not Coventry they have to discuss a lease from. It's Wasps because Wasps now own the Coventry Building Society arena, the former Rico, because they've bought the stadium outright off the Coventry City Corporation, and that's been a complicated issue with that stadium since it's opened in the last 20 years. So let's not even attempt to discuss that. But the situation is dire, and Coventry have thankfully got a resolution to their problem and are now in a very stable situation. They're at the right end of the table. They're looking upwards rather than downwards. But I don't want to keep going on about, obviously we've discussed Birmingham to death for like the best part of a week. But it is striking. It is striking the mess that Birmingham are in. But other clubs have been here before in the past. And the concern I have is this is not going to be the last time we see a club in this situation, unless something changes with the fan-led review has to happen. Recommendations have to be acted upon. Maybe not all 50 of them, but the director's test, as it currently stands, is not fit for purpose. The financial fair play rules, until UEFA changes them, yes, it's not fit for purpose, but they're not even enforcing those rules correctly. Yeah, but look at Derby County. I think Derby County won a few more bits of silverware than Birmingham in their history. The EFL letting them go to rack and ruin. Bury have gone out of business. Macclesfield have gone out of business. Portsmouth nearly went out of business. Sheffield Wednesday nearly went out of business. Yeah, the EFL really. It's got its market forces. We can't interfere. I'm sorry, but that doesn't. I wouldn't say Birmingham are a massive, massive club, but they are historical and they are important for. When I did the history video, they are important for the reason why the Football League grew so rapidly in those early years was they were playing in the Football Alliance and they were part of that merger of two rival leagues, and they predate the age of the football. They're older than the Football League, and you could argue if this was happening back in the 30s or 40s, that's a big thing, right? They're not. If this was happening, if Birmingham City were a Premier League club right now, and won a few more League Cups and FA Cups and played more games in Europe, then yes, absolutely, this is more of a discussion point. There's no denying that. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, Aston Villa nearly going into administration. There were Birmingham City fans rejoicing at that. What 4 years ago when I was discussing Aston Villa's situation at the time. That's what I call karma a little bit to a minority of your fan base, but you may unfortunately have to sell Joe Bellingham for whatever you can get him for. And that could be even a bigger death now, because that's a selling point for your club to get people interested. And that he could be the reason to get you out of trouble on the pitch. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, no one's too big to fail. I mean, look, Parma in Italy have gone out of business and reformed twice, and they've played in UEFA Cup finals and Cup Winners' Cup finals. So Palermo are now in the fourth division in Italy and had to reform, and they've been a Champions League and Europa League level club in the last 20 years. No club is too big to fail. Remember that. I mean, Borussia Dortmund have nearly gone out of business. When I say gone out of business, nearly failed. Rangers. No club is too big to fail, because unfortunately, and I do say this, and I do stress this with a lot of worry, the EFL will say, and they will say this quite rightly because it's in their rules, that they can't interfere too much. And market forces, that kind of thing. We have to enforce our rules. They'll enforce the rules when you go into administration, but they can't enforce their rules to prevent you from getting there. I do not understand the logic. Surely the objective is to prevent sides from getting into this situation by the proper enforcement of the rules that are currently in place. The rules that exist now, too many loopholes. But in theory, the theory behind financial fair play and the director's test is to prevent this situation. In reality, it doesn't. Yeah, like the situation with the youth system and the stadium and the ownership and the investigation is deeply concerning. Deeply, deeply concerning. And we'll see what happens in the summer. But a lot of the blame with the situation, much like, Leeds, 16 years to get back to the Premier League, and a very long time to clear all the debt and the bad finance and the administrations. Yeah, Bristol City, well, the whole ownership of Bristol City owns the rugby union, the football, and who else they own? I think it's the basketball in Bristol is owned by the same guy. This is a guy who wants to ring fence permanently the rugby premiership. And bearing in mind, Bristol's rugby team are also over the salary cap, but don't mention that. It's obvious they're over the salary cap. Yeah, Steve Lansdown, I don't like him at all. Look, if the rules were properly enforced, Bristol City would have been docked a lot of points every season, and they wouldn't be in the Championship, And Leeds, Peter Risdale. There's only one Peter Risdale. He should never be allowed near a football club ever again, by the way. And he's been involved with football since the Leeds debacle. And it took 16 years for Leeds to get back to the Premier League. They spent several seasons in what is now League One, the old Division 3, and the old Division 2 after the Premier League reform, but the third tier. And Bradford City haven't got back to the Premier League. Barnsley haven't got back to the Premier League. Swindon, Oldham are out of the Football League now. Ipswich have got a great history, and had things been different on a few occasions, the story's different. Ipswich are one of those sides heavily impacted by the European ban for English clubs. Oxford United win a League Cup in there. They went out of the Football League for a period. They weren't quite there at the top of English football for the time of the Premier League, but they were a Division 1 side for a period. And the clubs that I've named, Portsmouth, Sheffield Wednesday, ha- the chronic mismanagement and the failure by the Premier League and the Football League to protect sports assets, which are the clubs. Yeah, but I know, and the Spanish sponsorship that failed, Lanara, I think it was, that went out of business. Bad spot. Charlton, Jesus, poor Charlton. And they've had stadium issues, and they almost lost the Valley, and they got it back. And oh, there's loads of clubs that have got really shocking owners who are either in it for asset stripping to make themselves a pure profit, um, and Burnley, I think Burnley are in serious trouble. Burnley are going to tumble down the divisions, I think, because that leverage takeover. Um, really concerned because Ben Mee's going to leave on a free. James Tarkovsky's going to follow. That's the exodus of Burnley. Heaton and Pope are probably out the door. I can see the player exodus at Burnley picking up pace quite quickly. I can see them having a weakened squad next season. That's less competitive. That won't be able to make promotion or fight for the playoffs. I can see Burnley in serious trouble. Serious trouble. And I love to hate Burnley, but Burnley go down the shitter. I mean, that really damages the image of English football because they're founders of the original founders of the Football League, alongside Preston North End, Blackburn, Aston Villa, etc. Um, I wouldn't say Burnley would have been because of their squad. I think last season was a bit of a COVID impacted them. They got off to a slow start. The COVID outbreak they had in their squad went a pile up of fixtures. The international breaks coming at really bad times meant they couldn't get any momentum before Christmas. Um, but the ownership is a concern for me, big concern for me. That leverage takeover really really concerns me. Uh, with the debt that's now been lumped on a club which doesn't have a massive revenue stream because, ironically, if you look at Burnley and Blackburn, there's only 13, 14 miles between the two clubs, something like that. Accrington's in the middle. The economic spending power of Blackburn is 3 times that of Burnley. The population size is bigger. The average disposable income, so the purchasing power of fans, higher average incomes in Blackburn than Burnley, higher average house prices. Um, the Burnley fan base is a poor fan base in the sense of economically poor. They don't have a lot of spare cash. They're not going to be like getting big gate receipts and fans buying a lot of merch. They can't afford it. And that's been Burnley's problem since the 60s. Is economically depressed, uh, you know, mid-range sized town, ex-industrial town, heavily reliant on heavy industry and the railways. All that's gone. Textile industry, railways, because they had the old uh, was it Lostock Hall or Rose Grove? I think it was Rose Grove was the old locomotive depot that's now underneath the motorway. Again, as I say, I'm a railway nut, and I'm a big chuff nerd. I like the steam trains. It was one of the last steam locomotive depots opened in the late 60s. So the railway was very important as an employment centre in the town up until I think the 60s or 70s when it closed down. So they lose that source of employment. The textile industry declining, and a lot of the old cotton mills and textile mills closing down has affected the town. So it's not a lack of investment. So it's not a wealthy town. Blackburn, not overly wealthy itself, has had far more investment. Yes, there's been some downswing with again the textile industry and the railways. You know, you know the, the rail freight and that kind of connection, the transport logistics. But they've got the massive BAE Systems factory and development centre. There's more money being um, put into Blackburn. Accrington has got better economic prospects than Burnley. So Burnley's a very economically deprived area of southeast Lancashire. And then you've got the added impact of you've got Greater Manchester as an economic draw for people who are skilled who move away. And then you've got that added impact of other clubs around, be it rugby league, cricket, and football, who have got their catchment area. So Lancashire County Cricket Club, all the rugby league, Super League, and Championship sides with their catchment area. Preston North End, Accrington Stanley, Blackburn. The clubs from Greater Manchester, such as Man United, Man City, etc. And then you've got even clubs across in Yorkshire are even nicking, like Leeds, for example. You'll be surprised, but clubs across the Pennines are actually, nicking fans. And then you've got wealthier towns and cities that have had more investment, like Sheffield, like Leeds, like Blackburn, like Liverpool's had a massive amount of investment. Manchester, where people are leaving Burnley to look for work, and yeah, Burnley are a club. I mean, Blackburn, we did it. We ended up in the fourth tier in the decade before. We were in the bottom division in the 1980-81 season. Within 15 years, we win the Premier League, what was the old Division 1. So, yes, we ended up going down the divisions quite rapidly. But then it was a steady but measured climb up the divisions again. And we haven't been at that level since. And we've only spent 1 year in the third tier since then, since our lowest of the low. And the club had no money. The club was on its lowest ebb and nearly went out of the Football League. And Burnley have been in the same position. Burnley have been down in the lower divisions where there's less gate receipts and you're really struggling to make a living. I fear Burnley with the debt they have, with a fan base similar to what like Oldham, very deprived area with lower average incomes. I can see Burnley doing an Oldham, and that'd be catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic, because that club is that town. And I love to hate Burnley, I really do. I do hate the old Dingles, but I love to hate them because in reality, without Burnley, they're one of the founders of the Football League. Maybe the Football League doesn't get off. Maybe we've only got 11 clubs to sign up this rather than 12. An odd team league is weird, doesn't work. And it's the Football Alliance that wins out, and the game and the sport takes a different direction in the 1880s, 1890s. We don't call it the Football League, we call it the Football Alliance Championship or something, and clubs, the direction the sport would take and the rules that we have and the growth of the sport may not be as big as it is. And clubs like Burnley are integral to the foundation and the building of the sport as it is today. And that club is that town. It is the community. And I really fear for the future of Burnley Football Club because of the leverage takeover and the relegation and the debt. It should not have happened. Should not have happened at all. And this channel sorts my night out, and it's great just to get things off your chest. Got to rate the sport. Well, as a Blackburn fan, I'm meant to be bred to hate Burnley with a passion, more than Preston, more than Accrington, more than Bolton, Wigan, Blackpool, Fleetwood, Morecambe. I am bred to hate Burnley with passion. It's in our DNA, allegedly. No, I love to hate Burnley, but at the same time, a healthy, strong Burnley and a healthy, strong Blackburn is good for the English game. It's good for the league. It's like a healthy, strong Man United and a healthy, strong Liverpool is good for the league. Whether we like them or not is a completely separate matter. Strong, healthy rivalries like Bradford City versus Leeds United, Newcastle Sunderland, even Brighton Crystal Palace are healthy for the league going forward. You lose the rivalries, and you lose that intensity, you lose that player development, you lose fans. I had a girlfriend with a very strange Burnley accent, like having a Horlicks. I have a Horlicks, Genetics. I have a Genetics. But that's the thing. A sport without rivalries is not really the same. You can't sell it to a wider audience. You can't put bums on seats. Burnley, Burnley, it's Burnley. Go Burnley. I'm going up Burnley. Going up Turf Moor. And I do feel sorry for Sean Dyche. I think that was a massive mistake sacking him. Where he ends up, there's a few clubs looking for a manager. There are a few clubs that are looking for a manager. Blackburn being one of them. I don't think he does that though, because that would lead to riots in parts of Lancashire. But you know, I would disagree where we've got Wolves, Walsall, West Brom, Villa, and the bigger club get the better talent. Um, y- the West Midlands is again. I think even though West Brom, Villa, and Wolves are all founders of the Football League, and that Birmingham is a founder of the Football Alliance, so you know, real important clubs with the history of the game, the early stages of the professional structure football pyramid that we have today. Apart from Wolves and Villa, yeah, West Brom have won a few trophies and you've won a couple of League Cups and stuff and been to European finals. The West Midlands has massively underperformed in comparison to Greater Manchester and Merseyside and Lancashire and parts of London for the success. Considering the vital importance the West Midlands has for the early development of the Football League. Um, there should be more success coming out of the West Midlands, more trophies going to the West Midlands, more finals, more league titles than you actually have. And I've got to do history on Villa and Wolves and West Brom, Walsall, Coventry. I have to, do the history videos of these clubs, and then when you look at the major title and all the titles won and work out how many trophies, I think Liverpool actually have more than the West Midlands combined. I do believe in total. That includes all trophies. I think Liverpool have won more silverware, or Man United, or Liverpool, or both of them have won more silver than the West Midlands combined, and that shouldn't be the case. Um, so, yeah, football is at a crossroads, as I've been saying for quite some time now. I do honestly believe that, as with the situation right now, I currently believe that professional football, not only in this country but across Europe, across the world, is at a crossroads. Um, in the direction the sport's taking, with the Champions League format change proposals that UEFA put on the table, and there's new spending rule proposals that need to be voted on, and and other sports are also at a similar kind of crossroads at the moment. Liverpool's history, that's a video I've got to do. I've got to do a video on Everton and Liverpool. I do have to do a video, and eventually I'll get around to do as many football clubs as possible. Um, and then I'll have to obviously have a look at as many clubs as I possibly can over the summer in the evenings. I'll do like a video or two a night from next week. The rest of this week, I'm going to keep churning out content. While there's not a lot of things going on in the sports world. I mean, today I did what 9, 10 uploads. Majority were club history videos. So I'm going to try and do my best to keep the club histories. But what I find is they don't get a lot of as many views as I would like, um, and I can't do every single moment of uh, the club's history. So what I will do first is do all the West Midland clubs, combine all their major trophies together, and then I'll see if Liverpool have won more major trophies of the leagues, FA Cup, League Cups, and European trophies than the West Midland clubs combined. And I think Liverpool have won more major silverware than all the West Midlands combined, including all of Villa's success with West Brom and Birmingham City in there. What Wolves have won, because there's a fair bit of silverware distributed within those four clubs. But I think Liverpool have actually won more than those four West Midlands clubs combined for major trophies. That's League Cups, FA Cups, league titles, and European titles. I actually think Liverpool have actually won more. Oh, the East Midlands, what? Leicester. I think Leicester won 7 trophies in total. So, yeah. No. Yes, but I think a trophy. I think there's one trophy difference between them and Man United. There's one trophy difference, but Rangers have won more uh, domestic and European trophies than Liverpool. In fact, Rangers are the most successful club side for trophies won in history. There you go. Just a little tidbit. Um, no, I think for what UEFA counts as UEFA coefficient, I think it's one trophy for all titles because there's some defunct trophies in there and defunct competitions that are no longer played for. Like when I mentioned the Texaco Cup, for example, with what club was that won the Texaco? Was that Ipswich? That was Ipswich won the Texaco Cup. Um, so there are, it's close. Um, but yeah, the East Midlands hasn't had the success either. But then you've only really got Leicester, and to a certain extent, Notts County, Nottingham Forest, but I would class them as North East Midlands. So, what are your thoughts on Lee Bowyer being told to get on with his job? No, no money, no clarity, no communication, and basically not, and basically knowing if there's a takeover, he's gone. It's it. The Zenith Data Systems Cup. I mean, we're already cut the Texaco Cup. We're really coming up with some of the Anglo-Italian League Cup. There was some trophies. The Full Members Cup. Yeah, there were some trophies that were played for that were around for like a decade, 5 years here, a decade there. Um, the Lee Bowyer situation is the same thing with like Steve Bruce at Newcastle before the takeover's completed there. And it was the same for Rafa Benitez for the seasons prior to that. I'm not a fan of Lee Bowyer. I've made that clear before. But you put any manager in that position at any club in at any level of the football pyramid in England or overseas, it's not right. It's not fair, and the lack of communication is not acceptable. But technically, they've not broken any football league rules in that sense. In regards to if there's a takeover or not, anytime there's a takeover, 9 times out of 10, the incumbent loses his job with a replacement. It happened at Chelsea. Ranieri lasted a season. They replaced him with Mourinho. Um, it it's now happened technically at Burnley because Dyche is gone. Um, what happens to Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea? Does Bowley keep him there? Does he move on? Um, so that's one for you. Lee Bowyer because he's a thug. He's a thug. In his playing days, he was a thug, and he's had some instances as a manager as well that bring the game into disrepute. He's not a particularly nice individual. Uh, um, so there is that. In regard, Lee Bowyer connects three, not the three of the basket case clubs. Yeah, no, he did. No, he attacked an Asian taxi driver quite badly. In a Yes, he did assault an Asian taxi driver. And I think that when he was a Newcastle player or a Leeds player. As a Leeds player, he stamped on an opposition player's head during a European semi-final. And I think it might be when he was a Leeds player. It might be when he was a Newcastle player. I just remember when he was at Leeds, he did stamp on a player's head, an opposition player's head. And at Newcastle, he fought a teammate. Um, but no, Charlton, Birmingham, and Leeds. Three clubs that have been badly run off the field, and Lee Bowyer is a common denominator. I think he played for both Leeds and Charlton. I think he played for all three as well, if I'm not mistaken. I may not be right there, but I think he might have. It's Lee Bowyer. I'm not a fan of him. I, I, in regards to Lee Bowyer will end up at Derby. I hope not. Um, No, Wayne Rooney is committed to that club unless a bigger club comes along, pays his get out clause, which Derby need the money, and he ends up going elsewhere. But let's just say Rooney won't be leaving willingly, and the club don't want to let him go. He's committed himself to Derby unless the right offer comes along, and the current board go, we need the money. Thank you, Wayne, but your buyout clause of your contract um, actually will help us financially. This for the future of the club. So um, Wayne Rooney, I think, is committed to Derby for now, although he may move on for the benefit of the club financially. Not because they want to lose him, but they've got no choice. Um, do I think Jose Mourinho will manage another Premier League team again? And which one would it be? Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City. Well, I don't think he does. I think Mourinho prefers the less. I think Mourinho is happy at Roma for now. He's more relaxed at Roma, off away from the games. He drove the parade. He almost crashed the bus into the Tiber. He was trying to drive the parade bus and he couldn't drive it very well. Um, I don't think Mourinho comes back to the Premier League. I think he's right. I think he's happy at Roma at the moment. I think he suits Italian football better as well. His style of football suits the Italian game better. He has a better relationship with the Italian media. And he's slowly, at first, he wasn't winning the Roma fans over. It took a little time. And now he's won the Roma fans over as well. And they would be mad to get rid of him. So I think he's finally found a club where he's content. And no, I don't think he goes to PSG. Because when Mourinho puts his foot down, so there's big egos at PSG, and that will not end well. I don't think. I don't think he goes there. Plus, they've just extended Pochettino with a contract extension, so I don't know. I don't think it works in Portugal either. I think his style doesn't suit Portugal. I think he'll stay at Roma for a while, but he normally lasts like 2 3 seasons at a club and then moves on. So give him another 18 months, and then we'll find out. Um, who's better at Mourinho and Rafa? Mourinho's won more titles. Although Rafa has done more miracles with lesser budgets. So there you go. Rafa is a damn good manager, but Mourinho is one more. So if you're going by titles, one, it's Mourinho. If you're going by making players play better than they actually are and actually making players play above themselves and buy in, Rafa, it's a draw. Um, I don't think he suits the Portuguese style of play with the players that Portugal have available to select right now. If you didn't manage Inter and had a hatred with Juventus, Juve would be a good fit. Possibly. I would say Juve right now could use a bit of a kick up the arse, but it's Mourinho. But the funny thing is, Mourinho starts out at Barcelona as an assistant, goes to Porto, and he ends up coaching back in Portugal. And as a Portuguese bloke, coaching at Real Madrid just wouldn't have happened 30 years ago because of the cultural. The Portuguese do not like the Spanish, and the Spanish are very dismissive of the Portuguese culturally. So for a Portuguese man to coach Real Madrid, that doesn't happen 30 years ago. So Mourinho really is the special one, in my opinion, in the sense that he's breaking down barriers that culturally and historically, 30 years prior, it doesn't happen what he's done in the game. So, yeah, I think Mourinho is a bit. I think Mourinho just slightly edges Rafa, but personality-wise, I prefer Rafa when it comes to. Rafa's more likable, but Mourinho's got that little bit more ruthless streak about him. But Rafa, the rotation specialist, the Rafa Benitez rotation policy at clubs. Rafa did put his players' welfare a little bit above. He made sure his players were all equally rested, given a fair crack at the whip. Rafa wants to give every player a chance. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a 50-50. It depends on how you view the game and how you break down how they play, the styles, and their man management skills. Both are hard taskmasters, mine, but Rafa has a little bit more of a caring side. Mourinho just expects work ethic and fight. Rafa is a more caring fatherly figure, whereas Mourinho is like your angry school teacher. But either way, um, they're both equally good. I do remember the fight with Kieran Dyer. I mean, I've never liked Lee Bowyer. The incident with Lee Bowyer that sticks with me more is not the fight with Dyer on the pitch, is him stamping on the opposition player's head in a European game when he was playing for Leeds and getting sent off. He always had that real nasty streak in his game, cowardly nasty streak. Um, So there is that. Mourinho needs to go to the Bundesliga to complete his set of the big leagues. He's won everywhere where he's gone. The only club he's not won any silverware at is Spurs, because they sack him 3.5 days before a cup final. The most Spursy thing they could do. Um, um, I like the way we're now talking about Rafa and Mourinho and that Iberian connection. Look, I mean, the Spuds, Spursy. Um, Bundesliga don't suit Mourinho. No club would want him maybe before Pep got the Bayern job. Mate. I wouldn't say no, it doesn't suit Mourinho. I think it's the German system maybe with their their 50+1 rule, the youth coming through. Every German club has a lot of their own prospects. Um, I don't think the German system doesn't suit Mourinho. I think if the right offer came along, um, he would take it. But I think he's actually happy at Roma. I think he's finally found his happy place where he could actually manage for many, many years. And you know that I know it's the only Conference League, but it's brought a lot of pride back to the city of Rome, a city where both Roma and Lazio have chronically underperformed in Serie A for many, many years, and haven't won as much silverware as they should or could have. And he's brought back a sense of civic pride to the city. He's brought back a bond between the team and the fans that hasn't been seen since Totti was at the peak of his powers, and Ranieri was coaching there and playing there, and hasn't been seen since the 90s, early 2000s. So yeah. The European Super League came along a few days after he sat because he didn't believe in the format, and he was against the idea, and he told his players we're not training if they're signing up for it, and he knew, then it came out that the players weren't actually told